Hearts in a Fog. A whimsical paranormal rom-com packed with chaos, charm, and a dash of unexpected love. By Wynne Valentine. Copyright 2025 by Wynne Valentine. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored, or transmitted in any form by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, scanning, or otherwise without written permission from the publisher. It is illegal to copy this book, post it to a website, or distribute it by any other means without permission. This novel is entirely a work of fiction. The names, characters, and incidents portrayed in it are the work of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events or localities, is entirely coincidental. Wynne Valentine asserts the moral right to be identified as the author of this work. Designations used by companies to distinguish their products are often claimed as trademarks. All brand names and product names used in this book and on its cover are trade names, service marks, trademarks, and registered trademarks of their respective owners. The publishers and the book are not associated with any product or vendor mentioned in this book. None of the companies referenced within the book have endorsed the book. Book cover by Dana Sacco. Chapter 1: Glitter, Gaffs, and a Garden Gone Wild. Just a pinch of moonstone dust. Juliet Moon hummed to herself, swaying to an imaginary tune as she measured ingredients for her latest magical endeavor. The true love elixir bubbled cheerfully in her grandmother's antique cauldron, its copper surface gleaming in the afternoon light that filtered through her shop's stained glass windows. The windows' magical crystals cast rainbow patterns across her workspace, their protective enchantments humming softly. You know what they say about love potions. Zara's translucent form drifted overhead, her vintage polka dot dress rippling like water. They're about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. Especially when brewing them this close to the whispering woods. It's not a love potion, Juliet corrected, carefully sprinkling rose petals into the mix. Her fingers tingled as they passed through a particularly strong magical current, one of many that flowed through Evergloam, all seemingly drawn toward something deep within the woods. It's an elixir to help people recognize their true love. Totally different. Besides, she adjusted her round glasses with determination, this could help fix the whole curse situation. Ah yes, the curse. Your greatest hit. Zara floated upside down, her ethereal hair flowing like sea foam. Because magically meddling with love worked out so well last time. Especially since your magic has that weird resonance with emotional energy. This is different. Juliet's sweater sleeve, decorated with dancing black cats, nearly knocked over a jar of dried wolfsbane. The magical herbs inside rustled nervously, sensing the building tension in the ambient magic. I've done all the calculations. Triple-checked everything. What could possibly go wrong? The enchanted broom in the corner suddenly sprang to life, sweeping with frantic energy across the wooden floors. Its bristles traced strange patterns, as if responding to some ancient force stirring beneath the town. Juliet chose to ignore this ominous behavior, even as the shop's usual scent of lavender and cinnamon intensified to near overwhelming levels. Last ingredient, she announced, holding up a tiny crystal vial containing a single shimmering unicorn tear. The tear caught the light strangely, refracting patterns that seemed to reach toward the whispering woods. Just one drop and... Her oversized sleeve caught on a shelf of crystal balls, yanking her arm. The entire vial slipped from her fingers, plummeting toward the cauldron in slow motion. As it fell, the unicorn tear began to glow with an unnatural intensity, as if responding to something hidden deep within the woods. No. Juliet lunged forward, but it was too late. The vial disappeared into the bubbling mixture, with a delicate plink. The moment it made contact, the potion's color shifted from soft rose to vibrant fuchsia, and Juliet felt her magic surge outward, drawn toward whatever ancient power lurked in the whispering woods. The cauldron began to shake, emitting pink sparkles that danced through the air like miniature fireworks. Each spark seemed pulled toward the woods, as if answering an ancient call. That's probably fine, Juliet said weakly, backing away as she felt her emotional magic being amplified by something she couldn't quite understand. Just a slight miscalculation. Slight? Zara zoomed through the air, trying unsuccessfully to steady the wobbling cauldron. Your definition of slight needs work. The magical readings are off the charts. Juliet scrambled for her wand, knocking over bottles of enchanted ink and a collection of crystal pyramids. The pyramids' faces reflected the growing chaos, showing glimpses of strange shadows moving within the woods. I can fix this. I just need to. The cauldron let out an almighty boom that rattled every window in the shop. A wave of glittery pink smoke erupted skyward, coating everything and everyone in its path. The fog carried Juliet's emotional magic, but something else was twisting it, amplifying it into something far more potent than a simple love recognition spell. Juliet's purple hair stood straight up, making her look like a very sparkly purple dandelion. Cough well, she waved her arms frantically, trying to clear the air. At least the glitter's pretty? Jules? Zara pressed her face against the window. We might have a teensy problem. The magical smoke was seeping under the shop's door, spreading across Evergloam's cobblestone streets like cotton candy fog. Zara phased through the glass for a better look, leaving Juliet to anxiously chew her lower lip. Oh, this is bad, Zara announced upon her return. Mrs. Whiskers just chased Mr. Whiskers up a tree, and they've been happily married for 3 years. The werewolf couple at the cafe started arguing about who shed more on the couch. And don't even get me started on what's happening at the vampire speed dating event. No. Juliet frantically pulled spell books from the shelves, leaving glittery fingerprints on every page she turned. Mom's going to kill me. She's going to turn me into a toad, and then kill me. She paused. Actually, she'd probably make me organize her potion ingredients first, then turn me into a toad, then kill me. The enchanted broom swept aggressively around her feet as she paced, creating little hearts in the accumulated glitter before erasing them with pointed strokes. Look on the bright side, Zara offered, at least you're not dead. She waggled her ethereal eyebrows. Trust me, it's a grave situation. Not helping. Juliet moaned, just as magical text bubbles began materializing above the counter. My boyfriend just said my fangs make me look old. Vampirella 99. The fairy council meeting devolved into a glitter fight. Again? Wing it or nothing. Anyone else's familiar giving them the cold shoulder? Which please? Juliet raised her wand, attempting a quick dispelling charm. The fog outside merely sparkled more intensely, now resembling a disco ball explosion. Well? Zara drawled as her hand passed ineffectively through Juliet's shoulder in an attempt at comfort. At least it's pretty while it ruins everyone's love life. Juliet slumped onto the counter, surrounded by the chaos of her latest magical mishap. A stray sparkle landed on her nose, making her sneeze. I don't suppose you know any ghost tricks for cleaning up magical disasters? Nope, Zara popped the pea with ghostly enthusiasm. But I do know all the verses to the monster mash if you need cheering up. The enchanted broom swept past again, leaving a distinctly judgmental pile of glitter at Juliet's feet. The last thing Rhett Wolf needed today was pink fog messing with his deliveries. Yet here he was, weaving through Phantom Falls Market like a wolf on roller skates, dodging floating merchandise while sparkly mist swirled around his boots. He flashed his signature cocky grin at a group of witches, who giggled as he sidestepped their levitating cauldron display. Ladies? He winked, though the effect was somewhat dampened by having to duck under a string of enchanted wind chimes that seemed determined to tangle in his hair. The enchanted delivery schedule in his hand flickered and rearranged itself for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Moon's teeth, he muttered, watching as urgent Warlock Winston's wart removal cream switched places with standard Madam Whisker's catnip tea leaves. By the sacred hunt, give me a break. He shoved the schedule into his messenger bag with more force than necessary, deciding to wing it. Improvisation was more his style anyway, had been since his first delivery run ended with him scaling the town hall to rescue a wayward shipment of enchanted paper airplanes. A commotion ahead caught his attention, just in time to see Old Man Jenkins' levitating fruit cart give up the ghost with an alarming wheeze and sparkle of dying magic. Enchanted apples bounced everywhere like sugared-up puppies at a park, their golden skins reflecting the market's ambient light. Rhett's werewolf reflexes kicked in, and he lunged forward, his boots sliding perfectly against the cobblestones as he snatched 3 apples midair with a flourish that would have made his old gymnastics coach proud. "Still got it," he smirked, right before his momentum carried him sideways into Madame Moonweaver's ribbon stall, sending a cascade of silk and satin waterfalling around his shoulders. One particular ribbon, silvery and somehow alive, wrapped itself around his wrist like an affectionate snake. "Oh dear," Madame Moonweaver's knowing voice carried over the chaos, her ancient eyes twinkling with the sort of wisdom that made Rhett's fur stand on end. Her gnarled fingers reached out to study the silver ribbon that seemed determined to make itself at home on his wrist. "That's one of the elder tree's binding ribbons. They only manifest during times of great magical upheaval, choosing pairs whose combined energies might restore balance." "What do you mean, choosing?" Rhett tried to shake the ribbon loose, his heart rate picking up as the silk seemed to tighten in response. "It's just a piece of enchanted silk that—" "Oh, young wolf," Madame Moonweaver's laugh held centuries of secrets, the sound reminding him of wind chimes in an autumn breeze. "These ribbons were woven from the elder tree's first leaves, blessed by the ancient fae who founded Evergloam. They appear when the town's magic needs realignment. Though I haven't seen one activate since the great magical surge, when my own grandparents were bound together to prevent a catastrophe." The fog chose that moment to thicken, turning the market's floating lanterns into cotton candy-colored fireflies that made Rhett's enhanced vision swim. Around him, supernatural creatures stumbled like drunk tourists at a carnival, the mist seeming to have a mind of its own. A vampire in a business suit walked face-first into a display of crystal balls, apologized to a hat stand with impeccable manners, then continued in entirely the wrong direction, his usual grace completely abandoned. "Perfect. Just perfect." Rhett pulled out his phone, but instead of his contact list, the screen displayed a cascade of heart emojis and lyrics to Love Potion number 9. He jabbed at it uselessly. "Come on, you enchanted paperweight." The ribbon gave a sharp tug, nearly pulling him off his feet. "Whoa." He stumbled forward, crashing into a troll who was already confused about why he was holding 3 rubber chickens and a tea cozy. "Sorry, big guy, just passing through." Rhett's apology cut short as he careened into the fortune-telling display he'd been desperately trying to avoid. Crystal balls rolled everywhere, each one activating on impact. Their predictions filled the air like a supernatural dating service gone wrong. "You will find love in the arms of a clumsy witch. Beware the kiss of true love's first sneeze. Your soulmate will be wearing mismatched socks and carrying a defective love potion." Rhett ran his fingers through his usually perfect hair, making it stick up like he'd been struck by lightning. The messenger bag swung wildly, packages threatening to escape with each jerky movement the ribbon forced him to make. "Hey there, handsome," a high-pitched voice squeaked near his ear. He groaned. "Pixies. A whole swarm of them, their wings tinted pink from the fog and their tiny faces flushed with magical intoxication." "Not now, ladies, I'm kind of in the middle of—" A face full of glitter cut him off. "Hit it, sisters," the lead pixie called out, and they launched into an off-key rendition of Can't Help Falling in Love. Wise men say, more glitter. Only fools rush in, even more glitter. Every time he opened his mouth to protest, they took it as their cue for another glitter bomb. The fog's sickly sweet scent of roses and cotton candy overwhelmed his enhanced werewolf senses. He staggered to the nearest stall, leaning against it as his head spun. The mixture of sugar rush magic and pixie performance art was too much, even for his supernatural constitution. An ornate mirror hung on the stall's support beam, and Rhett caught sight of his reflection. His dark hair looked like he'd stuck his finger in a magical socket, glitter covered him from head to toe, and the ribbon pulsed cheerfully around his wrist like a disco bracelet. The mirror cleared its throat because of course it talked, and said in a posh accent, "Darling, you might want to fix your hair. True love waits for no wolf, but it does appreciate proper grooming." "Thanks," Rhett deadpanned. "Any other helpful advice?" The ribbon tugged again, more insistent than ever. The mirror brightened. Yes, actually. Duck. Duck? Why would I need to? A floating bouquet of enchanted roses zoomed past where his head had been moments before, trailing pink sparkles and singing "Love is in the air." Chapter 2, Meet Cute in the Mist. Era hummed softly to herself as she moved through her greenhouse, checking off items on her laminated daily care schedule. The morning light filtered through the glass panels, casting a warm glow on her carefully cultivated botanical paradise. Everything was precisely where it should be, until she noticed the strange pink fog seeping through the ventilation system. "That's not right," she muttered, watching her usually well-behaved swaying sweetgrass beginning to shimmy in distinctly non-regulation patterns. She made a quick note on her clipboard: investigate abnormal plant movement. Possible atmospheric contamination? A loud crooning sound shattered her concentration. Her prized Venus flytrap, normally content to snap at the occasional insect, had thrown back its trap-like head and launched into what appeared to be a passionate rendition of "I Will Always Love You." The watering can slipped from Era's fingers, splashing enchanted growth formula across her meticulously organized floor tiles. "No, no, no. Vincent, stop that this instant." She rushed toward the lovesick plant, her green hair streaming behind her as the glowing flowers woven through it pulsed with anxiety. The flytrap ignored her, transitioning seamlessly into "My heart will go on." "That's not right," she muttered, watching her usually well-behaved swaying sweetgrass beginning to shimmy in distinctly non-regulation patterns. She made a quick note on her clipboard: investigate abnormal plant movement. Possible atmospheric contamination? A loud crooning sound shattered her concentration. Her prized Venus flytrap, normally content to snap at the occasional insect, had thrown back its trap-like head and launched into what appeared to be a passionate rendition of "I Will Always Love You." The watering can slipped from Era's fingers, splashing enchanted growth formula across her meticulously organized floor tiles. "No, no, no. Vincent, stop that this instant." She rushed toward the lovesick plant, her green hair streaming behind her as the glowing flowers woven through it pulsed with anxiety. The flytrap ignored her, transitioning seamlessly into "My heart will go on." "This is completely unacceptable behavior," Era scolded, reaching for the greenhouse's magical climate control panel. Her fingers flew across the settings, adjusting humidity and magical resonance levels. "We do not sing Celine Dion in this establishment." A thunderous crash from the entrance made her spin around, garden shears instinctively raised. A tall figure stumbled through the doorway, tracking mud and leaves across her immaculate floor. Her emerald eyes locked onto the dirty footprints leading straight toward her rare magical orchid collection. "Hey there." Rhett Wolf flashed what he clearly thought was a winning smile, apparently oblivious to the fact that he was desecrating her sanctuary. He held up a package with one hand, while the other fought with what appeared to be a glowing ribbon wrapped around his wrist. "Special delivery?" The moment their eyes met, the ribbon shot from his wrist like a silver arrow, its other end wrapping firmly around Era's left wrist. A warm tingle spread up her arm as the ribbon contracted, yanking them together with supernatural force. They collided in an ungraceful heap, scattering carefully labeled plant markers everywhere. "What in the name of the elder tree?" Era tried to push away, but the ribbon only allowed them about 3 feet of separation before pulling taut. When she attempted to move left and Rhett right, it twisted between them like a crystalline cord, forcing them to stumble in a clumsy circle. "Don't look at me," Rhett held up his bound wrist. "This thing ambushed me in the market. One minute I'm making a routine delivery, the next I'm being magically gift-wrapped." The ribbon sparkled innocently, its silvery length shortening when they tried to separate and loosening slightly when they moved in the same direction. Era noticed how it pulsed with a warm light when they worked together to stand up, then dimmed and constricted when she tried to shove Rhett away from her precious specimens. "You're contaminating my sterile environment," she said through clenched teeth, trying to maintain professional distance. The ribbon had other ideas, pulling them closer every time she attempted to create space between them. Behind her, her row of carnivorous snapdragons began popping their jaws in perfect rhythm, swaying like backup dancers at a concert. One of them winked at Rhett. "Look, I just need a signature." He took a step forward, then froze as the snapdragons started beatboxing. "Are they supposed to do that?" "Nothing is supposed to do any of this," Era said, just as her prized meditation moss began emitting the unmistakable opening notes of careless whisper. She tried to reach for her documentation logs, but the movement pulled Rhett with her, sending them both stumbling into a shelf of hovering seed packets. The ribbon shimmered with what looked suspiciously like amusement, its glow brightening when they instinctively caught each other, and dimming when they jumped apart. When Era attempted to march Rhett toward the door, it went completely rigid, refusing to let them move until they found a pace that suited them both. "About proper greenhouse protocol," she began, attempting to regain control of the situation. "All visitors must wear sterile boots, sign a liability waiver, and—" she broke off as her patch of gossip daisies erupted into high-pitched giggling, their petals nudging each other suggestively. "Are your flowers laughing at us?" Rhett asked, looking far too amused for someone tracking fertilizer across sacred ground. "They're usually much more professional than this," Era insisted, just as the ribbon on his wrist blazed with sudden light. She stepped backward to avoid another mud puddle, but the ribbon had other ideas. It yanked Rhett forward like a magical bungee cord, sending them both crashing into her award-winning pottery display. "Catch the whispering willow," Era gasped, lunging for a teetering pot. "It's taken 3 years to achieve the proper melancholy disposition." They scrambled to prevent horticultural disaster, but every movement seemed to make things worse. The ribbon shortened with each twist, drawing them closer together until they were practically tangled in each other's arms. "This is entirely your fault," Era snapped, trying to ignore how her ears were burning pink. She reached for her enchanted cleaning supplies, but the usually reliable tools had arranged themselves into a heart-shaped pattern on the wall. Her favorite feather duster was spelling out, "Kiss" in cursive. "My fault?" Rhett's amber eyes sparkled with barely contained laughter. "I'm not the one with the greenhouse full of matchmaking plants." They both froze as the ribbon gave one final decisive twist, binding their wrists together. In the sudden silence, Era's prize-winning songfern cleared its throat and began a tender acoustic version of "Can't Help Falling in Love." "Oh, don't you dare," Era warned the fern, but it just swayed dreamily and launched into the chorus, while the snapdragons provided gentle harmonies. She turned back to glare at Rhett, acutely aware of how close they were standing. "This is not how my schedule planned out for today." "Let me guess," he grinned, holding up their bound wrists. "Getting magically tied to a charming wolf shifter wasn't on your checklist?" The gossip daisies swooned dramatically, and Era wondered if it was possible to die of mortification while her entire botanical collection played wingman. The pink fog swirled lazily through the foggy brew tavern, casting an almost romantic glow that made Donovan's stomach turn. He slouched deeper into his corner booth, the leather creaking in protest, as he shoved another handful of bacon-flavored chips into his mouth. His sharp yellow eyes tracked movement through the haze, catching snippets of chaos that would make any investigative journalist's day. His enchanted notepad bobbed eagerly beside him, its pages fluttering as it recorded the latest absurdities, the enchanted ink still wet and glistening. "Did you see Gregory from accounting? Writing sonnets about Sandra's fangs in the break room. He even compared them to pearls, can you believe it?" One witch cackled to another, her voice carrying through the pink haze. The notepad's quill scratched furiously, practically vibrating with excitement, splattering tiny droplets of ink that formed perfect little hearts on the leather booth. "And the werewolf pack down on Moonstone Street," another voice carried across the room, thick with barely contained laughter. "Howling, 'I will always love you' at 3 a.m. The whole neighborhood joined in for the chorus. Even old Mrs. Winterbottom, and she hasn't sung since her familiar ran off with that stray cat in '82. Donovan's lips twitched, despite his determination to maintain his cynical facade. The notepad added 3 exclamation points and drew a tiny musical note in the margin, followed by what appeared to be a small doodle of a howling wolf wearing a Whitney Houston wig. A drink materialized in front of him, dark and mysterious as his mood, wisps of vapor curling off its surface like questioning fingers. The liquid swirled itself into tiny question marks, matching his skepticism, before settling into a deep purple that reminded him of bruised egos and failed investigations. He ignored it, focusing instead on a group of council workers huddled in the opposite corner, their pristine suits a stark contrast to the tavern's casual atmosphere. Their matching silver badges gleamed through the fog as they leaned in, whispers urgent and faces drawn with concern, their SCREAM insignias catching the light like warning beacons. Damage control protocols must be implemented immediately. Containment is our top priority before this spreads further. His ears perked up at the mention of a familiar name, his enhanced werewolf hearing catching every syllable through the din of lovesick patrons. Lightfeather's called an emergency session, says it can't wait until morning. The notepad nearly did a backflip in its enthusiasm, pages rustling like autumn leaves in a windstorm. Donovan's hand shot out, steadying it, while he scribbled additional notes in his own cramped handwriting beneath the magical transcription, smudging bacon grease across the corner of the page. Sebastian Lightfeather, the vampire who'd blocked his last 3 exposés with legal technicalities and that insufferably smug smile, was finally showing signs of strain. The thought almost made him smile. Almost. But he'd learned long ago that premature celebration led to sloppy journalism, and he hadn't become the most feared reporter in Evergloam by being sloppy, no matter how satisfying it would be to see that pompous bloodsucker squirm. He pulled out his phone, checking that his anti-glamour app was active before snapping photos of the fog's unusual patterns. The pink mist seemed to dance away from his lens, forming hearts and cupids, before dissolving into tiny arrows that pointed accusingly at his camera. Finally, he muttered, crushing another handful of chips with particular satisfaction, proof of the council's incompetence in living color. Let's see them try to suppress this story. The tavern's magical menu chose that moment to float by, its corners curling invitingly as it displayed specials in shimmering text. Love Potion Lager. Guaranteed to make your heart flutter, and Cupid's Coffee, every sip a kiss. Donovan swatted it away with a growl, then winced as it crashed into a fairy's fluorescent cocktail. The resulting glitter explosion left 3 patrons looking like disco balls. Movement outside the window caught his attention. Through the foggy glass he spotted an odd pair, Rhett Wolf, the shifter courier known for his devil-may-care attitude, and Era Bloom, the uptight botanist. They were joined by what appeared to be a glowing ribbon, stumbling awkwardly as they tried to walk in opposite directions. The council members noticed too. Their whispers grew more intense, and one pulled out a crystal communication device. Donovan's journalistic instincts buzzed like angry wasps. He slid from his booth, intent on getting closer to the council's table. The fog chose that moment to thicken, and his usually graceful werewolf reflexes failed him. He stumbled, crashing into a circle of gossiping witches. Oh my stars! One witch clutched her pointed hat. Watch where you're going. My deepest apologies. Donovan smoothed his rumpled jacket, using the movement to drop a tiny magical recording device, shaped like an innocent coffee bean, near the council members' table. This fog, you know how it is. The witches huffed, but their attention quickly returned to discussing how the local vampire coven had spontaneously started a poetry slam in the cemetery. A commotion near the entrance drew every eye in the tavern. Sebastian's assistant, a harried-looking sprite, burst through the door, arms full of papers. In her haste to reach the council members, several documents escaped, floating through the pink haze like confused butterflies. Donovan casually snagged one from the air. His eyes widened as he read, Operation Fog Control, Preliminary Containment Procedures for Binding Magic Incidents. The notepad's quill practically danced across its pages. The pieces clicked together like a perfectly solved puzzle. The mysterious fog, the council's barely contained panic, that strange ribbon binding 2 unlikely people together. His face split into a grin that would have sent smarter creatures running for cover. He slipped out of the tavern, yellow eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. Pulling out his enchanted voice recorder, he whispered, Day 1 of the fog incident. The council's perfect facade is finally cracking, and I'll be there to document every moment of their downfall." He paused, then added, "Note to self, buy more bacon chips. This story might take a while." The fog swirled around him as he strode away from the foggy brew, his mismatched suit somehow looking more detective noir than disheveled in the mysterious pink light. Behind him, through the tavern's windows, the council members huddled closer, unaware that their every word was being recorded by an innocent-looking coffee bean. Chapter 3: Tangled Up in Trouble. The market's usual chaos had nothing on this mess. Rhett stumbled after Era, his natural grace completely shot, as the cursed ribbon yanked him along like an untrained puppy. Her green hair whipped behind her, nearly smacking him in the face, as she stormed through the floating stalls with the determination of a charging unicorn. "Could you maybe slow down a bit?" He ducked under a hovering display of enchanted wind chimes. "Some of us are attached to staying in one piece." "If you hadn't knocked over that entire rack of ribbons," Era started, then yelped as the silvery ribbon pulsed, drawing them together like magnets. They collided, Rhett's leather jacket squeaking against her practical gardening vest. "Technically, you shoved me into the rack when I tracked mud on your precious floor." He steadied her with one hand, trying to ignore how the ribbon hummed contentedly at the contact, sending little tingles up his arm that made his wolf instincts perk up with interest. "But who's keeping score?" "I am." She jerked away, or tried to. The ribbon contracted, forcing them to do an awkward sideways shuffle past a merchant selling bottled starlight. The ethereal glow caught in her hair, making it shimmer like spring leaves in sunlight. Not that he was noticing. And that mud was from a mischief marsh. "Do you know how long it takes to get those stains out?" 3 days, 2 hours, and 14 minutes. Rhett grinned as her head snapped around, enjoying the way her pointed ears twitched in surprise. His enhanced senses caught the faint scent of wildflowers and irritation rolling off her. "What?" "I delivered there all the time. The mud's ruined more pairs of boots than I can count." They reached the spot where the ribbon merchant's stall should have been, finding nothing but empty air and a floating piece of parchment. The note's ink shifted and sparkled as Era snatched it from the air, her fingers brushing against his in her haste. The contact sent another pulse through the ribbon that made his skin warm uncomfortably. "The binding ribbon of destiny chooses its victims, air wearers. Good luck." She let out a groan that would have done a banshee proud. "This can't be happening." "Look on the bright side," Rhett offered, fighting the urge to scratch at where the ribbon wrapped around his wrist like an overexcited puppy. "At least you're stuck with a charming wolf, and not some boring old." The ribbon tightened sharply, cutting off his words as they stumbled closer together. His enhanced reflexes were the only thing that kept them from crashing into each other again, though the scent of her was making his head spin in a way he refused to examine too closely. "Please don't finish that sentence," Era muttered as they navigated past a cluster of pixies selling suspicious-looking bottles labeled Fog-Enhanced Love Potion, now with 50% more sparkles. Rhett had to bite back another grin, as one of the pixies waggled its eyebrows at them suggestively. "Hey there, lovebirds." One pixie called out, wings shimmering. "Care to sample our newest blend?" "We're not," they started in unison, but a sudden burst of thick fog cut them off. Several floating lanterns dropped from above, their magical tethers disrupted. Rhett's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Era's waist, pulling her against him as a lantern crashed where she'd been standing. Time seemed to slow as she looked up, her emerald eyes widening as they met his amber ones. Rhett became acutely aware of how perfectly she fit against him, the scent of night-blooming jasmine clinging to her hair. The moment shattered as Era pushed away, or tried to. She managed about 2 feet before yanking out a scroll from her belt pouch. "There has to be a counter spell in here somewhere." "We could just wing it?" Rhett suggested, peering over her shoulder. "Sometimes the best solution is..." "Absolutely not." The ribbon chimed smugly as it contracted again, forcing them shoulder to shoulder. "Your winging it is what got us into this mess." They attracted quite the audience, as they attempted to navigate the crowded marketplace. Rhett's casual swagger clashed horrifically with Era's precise movements, creating what looked like a demented 3-legged race. Left, she commanded. No, your other left. I only have one left, he protested as they narrowly avoided a cart of enchanted teacups. The ribbon chimed melodiously every time their hands brushed, which was approximately every 3 seconds. Aira's cheeks flushed deeper with each musical note, while Rhett found the floating bargain prophecies, true love edition sign absolutely fascinating. Things went from bad to worse as they passed old Madame Melody's musical menagerie. The enchanted instruments sprang to life, striking up a waltz that the ribbon immediately synced to, pulsing in time with the music. Oh, for crying out loud, Aira muttered as their awkward shuffling transformed into something resembling a dance. This isn't? Sebastian. She suddenly called out, spotting the vampire's distinctive silhouette in the crowd. She raised her arm to wave, but the ribbon had other ideas. It yanked her backward mid-motion, sending her crashing into Rhett's chest. The surrounding charm vendors burst into applause. Now that's romance, someone shouted. Kill me now, Aira groaned into his jacket. Careful what you wish for, Rhett murmured, spotting a familiar figure shouldering through the crowd. Donovan at 3 o'clock. Without discussion, they dove behind a display of hovering carpets. The space was tight, forcing them chest to chest in the shadows. Rhett could feel Aira's heart racing, matching rhythm with the ribbon's pleased glow. Well, he whispered as Donovan's footsteps approached their hiding spot, I guess we're in this together now. Aira's reply was cut off by the sound of a magical camera clicking nearby. The ribbon's light dimmed slightly as they shared a look of mutual understanding. They'd have to work together to escape this mess, starting with avoiding Evergloam's most persistent journalist. For the first time since this chaos began, the ribbon's glow softened to a gentle shimmer, apparently satisfied that its victims, wearers, had finally found some common ground. Zara phased through the apothecary's weathered walls, trailing sparkles from the magical fog like a disco-loving specter. She found Juliet exactly where she expected, buried beneath a towering stack of ancient tomes, her purple hair crackling with static and sticking up in directions that defied both gravity and fashion. You look like you stuck your finger in a lightning bolt, Zara observed, drifting toward a shelf of enchanted crystals. They chimed a delicate greeting, their song reminiscent of wind chimes in a gentle breeze, and she felt the familiar pang of longing. Being a ghost meant she could hear their melody but never quite touch them. But wait until you hear what I witnessed at the market. It's better than that time Sebastian got trapped in bat form at the winter formal, and spent 3 hours dramatically perched on the disco ball. Juliet peered up from behind a particularly dusty volume, her glasses slightly askew. Please tell me the fog isn't making things worse. Oh honey, Zara floated upside down, her vintage polka dot dress swaying in an invisible breeze, pearls glinting in the afternoon light that streamed through the shop's windows. Define worse. Because I just watched your magical oopsie turn into the best supernatural rom-com since I died. She launched into an elaborate reenactment, swooping through the air with all the dramatic flair she'd perfected in her afterlife. Picture this, our favorite grumpy botanist and the world's most laid-back courier now starring in Tied Up in Knots, a Magical Mishap. Coming soon to a magical disaster near you. Juliet snorted as Zara alternated between mimicking Aira's rigid posture and anxious plant-tending gestures, then Rhett's casual slouch and cocky grin. The ribbon actually bound them? Like two cats in a yarn shop during a catnip festival. Zara drifted toward the wall where an aged map of the Whispering Woods hung, its edges curling with mystical age and emitting a faint earthy scent that even her ghostly senses could detect. But here's the interesting part. She gestured to the map's representation of the elder tree, its painted branches seeming to shimmer and dance beneath her translucent fingers. Notice anything familiar about that glow? Juliet squinted, pushing her glasses up her nose. It matches the fog's sparkle. Exactly. Zara concentrated, manipulating the fog's sparkles that clung to her spectral form like ethereal sequins. The glittering particles swirled into a miniature recreation of the ribbon binding Rhett and Aira, a talent she'd perfected through decades of ghostly mischief. I've seen this kind of magic before, in my more adventurous afterlife wanderings through places living folks can't reach. It's got the elder tree's signature all over it, like a magical fingerprint that's impossible to forge. She phased through several bookshelves, her ethereal energy pulling out relevant texts like a spectral librarian on a mission. The familiar tingle of passing through solid objects never got old, even after decades of haunting. And speaking of signatures, guess who's playing supernatural Sherlock Holmes? She affected a gruff voice, making sure to capture Donovan's particular brand of self-importance. Day 3 of investigation. Suspicious sparkles continue to plague town. Possible connection to council corruption. Must remember to pick up more bacon-flavored notepad. He's got 3 different kinds already, by the way. I counted. Juliet giggled. Donovan's really on this, huh? Like a werewolf on a meat wagon. Zara's excitement sent the temperature plummeting, her ghostly energy rippling through the room. The magical thermometer spun wildly, its mercury dancing like a caffeinated fairy, and the enchanted broom scuttled into a corner, bristles quivering. But don't worry, I've got plans for our nosy newshound. Been practicing some new tricks just for him. The security crystals suddenly pulsed with warning light, their purple glow reflecting off the fog's shimmer and casting eerie shadows across the shop's cluttered shelves. Zara pressed a finger to her lips and dove through the wall, the sensation like sliding through cool silk. Outside, Donovan paced the cobblestones, his mismatched suit collecting fog droplets, as he muttered into his recorder about council conspiracies and suspicious timing. When she phased back inside, her spectral form practically vibrated with mischief, the air around her crackling with ghostly energy. Watch this. She demonstrated her newest trick, creating interference that transformed Donovan's serious dictation into nothing but lyrics from cheesy love songs, a skill she'd perfected after haunting a karaoke bar for practice. Next time he plays back his evidence, it'll be nothing but "Can't Help Falling in Love" on repeat. Took me weeks to figure out how to manipulate electronics just right. Floating upside down, her vintage dress defying gravity in a way that would have scandalized her living self, Zara launched into an impression of Donovan's inevitable reaction. She contorted her face into exaggerated expressions of confusion and frustration, miming throwing a recorder while humming romantic ballads. Her performance included an especially dramatic rendition of him discovering his precious bacon-flavored notepads had been replaced with heart-shaped ones. Juliet doubled over, her laughter sending sparks of accidental magic into the air that danced through Zara's translucent form like fireflies. But wait! Zara suddenly flickered with excitement, diving toward a particular tome. She passed through it several times in her enthusiasm, before managing to point at a specific passage. Look at this, the elder tree has a history of matchmaking? Matchmaking? Juliet leaned forward, nearly knocking over a stack of books. Apparently, it has a thing for bringing together complementary souls. Zara conjured a ghostly map in the air, marking locations with spectral X's. And guess who's going to be tracking our intrepid reporter, while he tracks our reluctant lovebirds? She traced Donovan's usual routes, adding little hearts where she planned to create supernatural surveillance spots. This ghost is going full Mission Impossible. Juliet raised an eyebrow. Just try not to get caught? Please, Zara scoffed, beginning to sink through the floor. She offered a dramatic salute, humming the spy theme. I'm already dead, what's the worst that could happen? Her spectral glitter lingered in the air as she disappeared, the faint notes of her humming echoing through the shop's cozy chaos. Chapter 4, A Greenhouse of Grievances. Era paced between rows of increasingly amorous plants, her normally orderly greenhouse transformed into a botanical dating service. Heart-shaped vines reached out like eager suitors, while normally dignified flytraps had abandoned their predatory nature in favor of serenading anything that moved. Behind her, the cursed ribbon ensured Rhett followed like an reluctant dance partner. If we categorize the affected specimens by behavior patterns. She pulled out her trusty checklist, ignoring Rhett's dramatic sigh. We can implement a systematic approach too. Or we could just wing it, Rhett suggested, ducking as a particularly bold vine tried to caress his face. You know, like normal people dealing with love-drunk plants? Era's pointed ears twitched in annoyance. There's nothing normal about this situation, and chaos isn't a viable strategy. A cluster of enchanted roses apparently disagreed, choosing that moment to launch a barrage of petals at them like eager flower girls at a wedding. Rhett's eyes widened a moment before he let out an explosive sneeze that sent rose petals swirling. Allergic? Era asked, unable to completely mask her amusement. Werewolf senses, he grumbled, rubbing his nose. Everything's enhanced, including... Another sneeze interrupted him, this one powerful enough to ruffle her hair. The ribbon between them suddenly brightened, and Era felt her own botanical magic surge in response to his heightened senses. Without thinking, she waved her hand in a precise pattern, creating a shield of filtered air around them. At the same time, Rhett's wild magic strengthened her spell, extending its reach to push back the amorous flora. That's unexpected, Era murmured, watching how their combined magic created patterns she'd never seen before in her years of study. Stand back while I handle the climbing specimens. Era positioned a ladder beneath an especially amorous ivy plant that had started forming heart shapes with its tendrils. She'd barely reached the third rung when the ribbon yanked, nearly sending her toppling. Rhett's hands steadied her waist instantly. Careful, Green. As he touched her, their magic flickered visibly, her structured botanical energy interweaving with his raw instinctive power. The ivy, responding to their combined aura, actually began to behave itself. Her ears burned pink at the contact. I had it under control, she muttered, focusing intently on pruning the ivy and not on the warm pressure of his hands, or the way his height meant his breath tickled the back of her neck. Or how their magic seemed to dance together, creating something entirely new. A dreamy sigh from below made her glance down. Several moonflowers had clustered around the ladder's base, their petals swaying as they began an eerily harmonized version of Can't Help Falling in Love. Oh, for heaven's sake, Era groaned. Rhett tilted his head back and let out a piercing howl that somehow managed to be both completely off-key and oddly melodic. The moonflower's song cut off mid-verse, their petals drooping in shock. But more than that, his howl had carried traces of wild magic that, when it met Era's careful spellwork, created a dampening field around the most affected plants. Era stared at him, scissors frozen mid-snip. That actually worked. He grinned up at her, amber eyes twinkling. Sometimes the unconventional solution is the best one. The ribbon between them loosened slightly, its light pulsing in approval. Their forced proximity created an awkward dance as they moved through the greenhouse. Era carefully measured plant food, while Rhett's quick reflexes helped them dodge the occasional airborne succulent. The ribbon kept them in a constant orbit, like binary stars unable to break free of each other's gravity. The pH balance needs to be exact, she insisted, measuring drops into a beaker. Too alkaline and... A small storm cloud materialized above them, unleashing a localized downpour. Before Era could react, Rhett had shrugged out of his leather jacket and held it over her head, sheltering her measurements from contamination. The climate control's gone haywire too, he asked, water dripping from his silver-streaked hair. Obviously, she replied, but couldn't help smiling at his quick thinking. The jacket smelled like leather and pine needles, and something uniquely him that made her measurements waver slightly. Their tentative cooperation shattered when a Venus flytrap snatched her checklist right out of her hands. My protocols. Era lunged for the paper, but the ribbon yanked her back against Rhett's chest. Forget the list, he said, tracking the flytrap's movements with predatory focus. Follow my lead. I don't follow? Trust me. His hand found hers, and before she could protest, he was guiding her through a series of quick steps that somehow kept them in perfect position to corner the plant. Working together, they managed to retrieve the checklist and herd a group of cacti back to their designated area. Era couldn't help noticing how the ribbon's glow softened when they moved in sync, though she steadfastly refused to analyze what that might mean. You know what I think? Rhett said as they finished securing the cacti. These plants are really growing on me. The terrible pun startled a laugh from Era before she could stop it. She felt her hair flowers brighten with amusement, and caught Rhett staring at the display with an unreadable expression. "The fox affecting them like a pack," he said suddenly, still watching her glowing flowers. "They're not just acting individually romantic, they're feeding off each other's behavior, amplifying it. Like wolves during a full moon." Era's eyes widened. Of course. They're responding collectively to the magical stimulus, creating a feedback loop of increasingly exaggerated romantic behaviors. She turned to him, excitement overriding her usual reserve. "That's brilliant. They just managed to calm a particularly dramatic orchid using their new understanding," when the ribbon hummed, drawing them closer. Era found herself mere inches from Rhett, close enough to count the silver strands in his hair and see the flecks of gold in his eyes. They jumped apart simultaneously, though the ribbon kept them from getting too far. Around them, the plants swayed suggestively despite the greenhouse being completely still. "We should?" Era cleared her throat. "We should document these findings." "Right," Rhett agreed quickly. "Documentation. Very important." Neither mentioned how the ribbon continued to glow with a warm, steady light, or how their new working rhythm felt as natural as breathing. There would be time to analyze those details later, preferably when the plants stopped trying to play matchmaker. Juliet's desk drawers had always been a portal to chaos, but today they seemed particularly determined to prove it. She yanked open the bottom drawer, sending a cascade of enchanted paperclips flying, each one transforming into a tiny metal butterfly mid-flight. "Come on, where is it?" She rummaged deeper, past crystal balls that showed soap opera reruns, and through a tangle of self-knitting yarn that had developed separation anxiety. The yarn whimpered pathetically as she pushed it aside, trying to cling to her fingers like a touch-starved kitten. "I know my fix, it wand is here somewhere." Juliet?" Zara's transparent form drifted closer, her vintage dress rippling in an unseen breeze. Her pearl necklace caught the afternoon light, sending tiny rainbow prisms dancing across the walls. "You mean that glowing stick behind Mr. Photosynthesis?" Juliet whirled around to spot a faint purple glow emanating from behind her prized Venus flytrap, which had apparently developed literary aspirations. The plant's leaves rustled as it scratched out what appeared to be a sonnet about sunlight and chlorophyll, occasionally pausing to chew thoughtfully on the pencil. "Aha!" Juliet lunged for the wand, nearly face-planting into the poetry-writing plant. Her glasses went slightly askew as she stretched, and her constellation-patterned sweater rode up. The moment her fingers wrapped around the handle, the wand sparked like a misfiring sparkler, sending waves of magic through the shop in erratic purple pulses. Potion bottles lifted off their shelves, dancing through the air before arranging themselves into elaborate heart formations. A few of them waltzed past her head, their labels fluttering like tiny ball gowns. Her measuring spoons, usually content to nest quietly in their drawer, burst into synchronized swimming routines, complete with tiny splashes of magical sparkles and what sounded suspiciously like humming under the sea. "Your aim's gotten better," Zara commented dryly, as Juliet positioned herself before the full-length mirror, brushing stray strands of purple hair from her face. "Last time you only destroyed half the inventory. We're definitely looking at a solid 60% chaos today." "Nobody asked you," Juliet muttered, adjusting her stance and trying to ignore the way her freckles seemed to be glowing slightly from the residual magic. "Darling, your posture is absolutely dreadful," the mirror chimed in with its usual posh accent, somehow managing to sound both concerned and condescending at once. "And really, purple hair with that sweater? Let's discuss your dating prospects, or rather the tragic lack thereof." "Not now." Juliet waved the wand experimentally, generating concerning purple sparks. "Oh yes, because angry wand waving always ends well," Zara floated upside down, grinning. "Remember the Valentine's Day incident? That rabid Cupid was not my fault." Juliet attempted a particularly ambitious flourish. "Besides, everyone's hair grew back eventually." The wand chose that moment to activate, transforming Juliet's already frazzled purple hair into floating heart shapes that pulsed with each beat of her increasingly anxious heart. Her oversized sweater, featuring dancing black cats that had previously been content with their choreographed routine, suddenly sprouted tiny singing cupids from its pattern. They launched into an off-key rendition of Can't Help Falling in Love, complete with dramatic swooning gestures that made her dizzy just watching them. Well, Zara snickered, executing a perfect ghostly backflip. At least your outfit's coordinated now. Though I'd argue the cupids could use some voice coaching. Determined to salvage the situation before it spiraled completely out of control, Juliet scrambled onto the counter, wobbling precariously as her enchanted broom zoomed over to spot her like an overprotective parent. The wooden handle nudged anxiously against her back. I've got this. Just need a better angle to fix the fog, and maybe a dash of altitude will help the spell stick this time. Because height is definitely the problem here, Zara deadpanned, watching the broom frantically sweep up multiplying piles of glitter that seemed to spawn faster than garden gnomes at a midnight rave. Not the fact that your wand's gone full Romeo and Juliet on us. The wand hummed ominously in Juliet's grip, vibrating with what she could only describe as romantic determination, before releasing a burst of magic that transformed the shop into a romantic comedy gone horrifically wrong. Teapots began serenading each other with bubble tea ballads, their spouts whistling elaborate harmonies, while her spellbooks engaged in speed dating sessions, their pages fluttering frantically as they swapped magical pickup lines that made her cringe with secondhand embarrassment. Her prized cauldron, usually so dignified and proper, developed a case of the hiccups, each one releasing a heart-shaped bubble that floated up to join the growing collection on the ceiling. The bubbles occasionally burst into showers of rose petals that dissolved into more glitter. Zara phased through the chaos, dodging the sudden appearance of floating love letters that seemed determined to deliver themselves to the most incompatible pairs of objects. Oh, this is gold. The ghost pulled out an ethereal notebook, her transparent form practically vibrating with glee. Dear Mop, your bristles shine like moonlight on water. Your clean sweeps leave me breathless. Signed, Eternally Yours, Dustpan. I'm keeping these for blackmail material, or at least your next birthday party. Not helping. Juliet aimed the wand at the fog visible through her shop window, silently praying to whatever deity watched over clumsy witches. The resulting spell backfired spectacularly, creating a miniature pink hurricane that sent everything spinning in a lovesick tornado. When it finally settled, every single item in the shop had apparently developed an overwhelming passion for romance writing, leaving trails of poetic prose floating in sparkling cursive through the air. His cauldron was pewter, but their love was pure gold, Zara read from a floating manuscript. Your cash register has quite the flair for dramatic prose. Juliet slumped against the counter, defeated. Her hair hearts drooped sadly while the wand produced a tiny violin soundtrack, perfectly suited to her mood. Glitter rained down like shimmering tears, coating everything in a layer of sparkly disappointment. Wait a minute. Zara suddenly perked up, her form growing brighter. Juliet, look at your disaster, your magical signature. Through the chaos, Juliet noticed how the surrounding enchanted items seemed to pulse in sync with her emotions. When she sighed heavily, the romantic novels floated in a melancholic dance. When she perked up with curiosity, the heart bubbles bounced excitedly. Maybe we can use this. Juliet straightened, accidentally channeling her enthusiasm through the wand. Her cash register immediately sprouted tiny wheels and rolled over to the bookshelf, presenting it with a ring made from a twisted paperclip. And there goes your organizational system. Zara added another line to her growing list. Though I have to admit, they make a cute couple. Watching her shop's items dance and swirl in perfect harmony with her chaotic magic, Juliet felt something click. Zara, what if we've been thinking about this all wrong? Maybe the fog doesn't need fixing, it needs? She was interrupted by her cash register and bookshelf zooming past, leaving a trail of receipt confetti as they eloped toward the door. The fix-it wand shot out a celebratory shower of hearts, adding to the general bedlam. Property damage? Zara suggested helpfully, adding another tally to her list. Chapter 5, Whispers of the Woods. Era fought the urge to catalog every peculiar shadow the cursed ribbon cast as it tugged her and Rhett toward the whispering woods. Its silvery glow painted ethereal patterns across her carefully pressed botanical journal, making her wish she'd brought her color-changing ink to properly document the phenomenon. "Stop dragging your feet," she muttered as Rhett's leisurely pace forced her to slow down. "Some of us have actual work to do." "You mean besides your very important doodling?" He flashed that infuriating grin that made her want to stuff his mouth with silence-inducing silverleaf. "Besides, the woods aren't going anywhere." The ancient trees creaked overhead, their branches weaving together to form natural archways that seemed to pulse with the same pink fog that had thrown her greenhouse into chaos. Era pulled out her journal, determined to maintain some semblance of order in this mess. "Fascinating," she murmured, sketching the outline of a mutation she spotted on a nearby thornbloom. "The fog appears to be accelerating the magical properties of—" She stumbled as Rhett suddenly halted. "Something's different." His nose twitched, amber eyes scanning the shadows. "The energy's shifting. Getting stronger." The path narrowed, forcing them closer together. Era could feel the heat radiating off him, distracting her from properly documenting the increasing density of luminescent fungi along the trail's edge. The mushrooms, typically a dull blue, now glowed with an intense pearl sheen, their caps reorganizing to form letters. "True love blooms in unexpected." "Nope, not reading that," Rhett announced, quickly averting his eyes. Era pretended to be fascinated by a particularly ordinary fern. Clearly these fungi have been contaminated by the fog's magical properties. Their normal behavioral patterns wouldn't include such ridiculous predictions. They emerged into a clearing that took even Era's breath away. The fog swirled like liquid pearls around the massive elder tree, its ancient bark rippling with expressions that seemed far too knowing for her comfort. She clutched her notebook tighter, while beside her, Rhett's usual swagger faltered. The ribbon between them pulsed with renewed energy, forcing them to circle the massive trunk. The elder tree's leaves rustled with unmistakable purpose, forming words that drifted down like autumn rain: bonds formed and bonds broken, paths crossed and paths chosen. The ancient bark shifted, revealing images that glowed with otherworldly light. A crystalline artifact pulsing with raw magical energy, its creation during the first age of Evergloam. The vision showed 5 ancestors weaving spells of containment around it, their magic a delicate dance of order and chaos. The discord relic, the tree's leaves whispered, born of necessity when magic ran wild and untamed. Created to store excess magical energy, but its power grew beyond control. It feeds on emotional turmoil, amplifying discord until balance fails. More images formed, past incidents where the artifact had awakened, pink fog rolling through different eras of Evergloam. Each time the tree had chosen pairs to contain its power, a structured mage and a wild talent working in harmony to restore balance. "The fog is its breath," the tree continued, branches weaving patterns in the air. "As discord grows, so does its influence. Your binding is no accident, your magics mirror those who first contained it. Order and chaos, structure and wildness, working as one." The bark rippled again, showing the artifact's current location deep within the whispering woods. Pink tendrils of fog seemed to pour from it, spreading the chaos that had thrown Evergloam into romantic turmoil. "But why now?" Era asked, her analytical mind racing to catalog every detail. "What triggered its awakening?" The tree's leaves shimmered with concern. "Balance shifts, tensions rise. The council's politics, the community's divisions, all feed its power. Without intervention, its influence will grow beyond containment, transforming more than just matters of the heart." Rhett stepped closer to Era, the ribbon between them glowing brighter. "So no pressure, just save the town from being permanently love-struck by an ancient magical battery with an attitude problem?" "Well, that's helpfully vague," Rhett muttered, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Era tried to focus on documenting the tree's unusual behavior, but shadows and light danced across her pages, forming images of the wailing well. The fog in the pictures seemed to pour from the well's depths, but that couldn't be right. Her careful research had never mentioned. The ribbon yanked sharply, sending her stumbling into Rhett's solid frame. "Sorry?" they said simultaneously, then awkwardly tried to step apart, only to be pulled back together. "Hearts aligned when waters sing," the elder tree whispered, its branches swaying with amusement. Rhett suddenly tensed beside her, his head snapping toward the darkness beyond the clearing. Without warning, he wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her behind the massive trunk. "Someone's coming," he breathed against her ear. Era froze, acutely aware of how his chest pressed against her back, how his breath stirred her hair. Shadows moved at the clearing's edge, voices murmured just out of reach. She didn't dare move, even when a glowing petal drifted down to land on her nose. Above them, the elder tree's leaves arranged themselves into unmistakable smirking faces. More luminescent petals rained down, catching in Rhett's dark hair like stars. He looked ridiculous, and she would have told him so if she wasn't certain she appeared equally absurd. When the mysterious figures finally passed, neither of them moved immediately. The ribbon hummed between them, warm and insistent. "Look," Rhett said softly, pointing upward. A single golden leaf drifted down, pulsing in perfect time with their binding ribbon. They reached for it simultaneously, then stopped as the movement pulled them flush against each other. "You take it," they said in unison, then glared at each other. The elder tree's laughter rustled through its branches as the leaf continued its lazy descent, clearly in no hurry to resolve their predicament. "On three?" Era suggested, trying to ignore how the fog made Rhett's eyes spark like amber in sunlight. "On two." They grabbed the leaf together, fingers brushing. A warm tingle shot up Era's arm, and the ribbon glowed brighter than ever. "The well awaits those bound by fate," the elder tree's whispers followed them as they made their way back to the path, where flowers bloomed with each step, marking a clear trail toward their destination. "I suppose we should follow the suspicious glowing flowers?" Rhett asked, still holding his half of the golden leaf. Era sighed, making a final note in her journal. "Given our current options appear to be, follow the suspicious glowing flowers, or stay here and let this tree continue matchmaking, I vote for the flowers." The elder tree's knowing chuckle echoed behind them as they set off, the ribbon ensuring they stayed close enough for their shoulders to brush with each step. Rhett tried not to stare as Era scribbled furiously in her leather-bound notebook, her green hair catching the ethereal light that filtered through the fog. The way her brow furrowed in concentration while documenting the elder tree's cryptic message was almost cute. He shook his head, banishing the thought. Getting distracted by a pretty face, even one belonging to an uptight botanist, wasn't going to help them break this curse. The elder tree specifically mentioned harmonious steps toward the wailing well, Era muttered, tapping her pen against the page. "Perhaps if we categorize the possible interpretations based on known magical flora patterns." The ribbon gave an insistent tug, pulling them toward a towering wall of shimmering pink mist that blocked their path. Rhett stumbled forward, catching himself before he crashed into Era's back. "Watch it, Wolf," she said without looking up from her notes. Now, considering the prismatic properties of the barrier, it could be related to the defense mechanisms of the luminous lotus, or possibly? Or we could just, walk through it? Rhett suggested, earning him a look that could wither one of her prized specimens. Because charging blindly into magical barriers always ends well? She flipped through her notebook. The thorned moonflower exhibits similar light-refracting properties when threatened. If we apply the same principles of... Rhett found himself oddly fascinated by her methodical approach, even as his legs itched to move. The ribbon seemed to pick up on his conflicting emotions, warming against his wrist with a gentle pulse that made Era pause mid-sentence. "Something wrong?" she asked, eyeing the glowing band. "Nope. Just enjoying your dramatic reading of Encyclopedia Botanica." He flashed her a grin, trying to ignore how the ribbon's warmth spread up his arm. Era rolled her eyes and returned to her analysis, but Rhett's attention had shifted to the barrier itself. The way the pink mist swirled and shifted reminded him of the high-end security systems some of his more paranoid clients used. Those magical barriers had patterns, rhythms you could exploit if you knew what to look for. "Hey, Professor Plant," he interrupted her ongoing lecture about bioluminescent fungi. "I think I've got an idea." Shocking. No need to sound so surprised. He stepped closer to the barrier, his enhanced vision tracking the subtle shifts in the mist. "See how it pulses?" Like a heartbeat? Era's skeptical expression softened slightly as she studied the pattern. You're right. There's a clear rhythm to the magical fluctuations. Trust me on this one. The words slipped out before he could stop them. I've got some experience with magical barriers in my line of work. Legal experience? She asked, arching an eyebrow. Mostly. He grinned and held out his hand. We need to time this right. Follow my lead? To his surprise, she placed her hand in his without argument. The ribbon hummed between them, and Rhett tried to ignore how perfectly her smaller hand fit in his. Quick steps now, he instructed, guiding her through a series of movements that matched the barrier's rhythm. Left-right pause now. They moved together, finding gaps in the magical defense that normal eyes wouldn't spot. When Era stumbled on a particularly tricky sequence, Rhett's hands automatically found her waist, steadying her. The subtle scent of night-blooming jasmine filled his nose, triggering his wolf's protective instincts in a way that caught him completely off guard. I've got you, he murmured, his hands lingering longer than necessary. The ribbon pulsed brighter, and he quickly stepped back, clearing his throat. Their synchronized movements finally paid off, as the barrier parted like a silk curtain, revealing the path beyond. Era turned to him with genuine amazement in her eyes, and Rhett felt his carefully maintained swagger falter under her impressed gaze. That was surprisingly competent, she admitted. High praise indeed. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to shake off the unfamiliar feeling of wanting to impress her further. Since when did he care what anyone thought of his methods? The ribbon chose that moment to put on a spectacular light show, reflecting his emotional turmoil in waves of color. Era's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. The ribbon seems quite responsive to your emotional state, she observed. Must be reacting to your overwhelming joy at my barrier-breaking brilliance, he deflected, falling back on humor to mask his sudden vulnerability. Before she could respond, another wall of mist materialized ahead of them. This one rippled with deeper shades of purple and blue, its pattern more complex than the first. The magical density appears significantly higher, Era noted, already reaching for her notebook. If we analyze the wavelength variations. Or, Rhett interrupted, surprising himself with his next words, we could combine approaches? Your eye for patterns, my experience with the timing? The smile she gave him was small but genuine, sending an unexpected warmth through his chest that had nothing to do with the ribbon's magic. A reasonable suggestion, she conceded. Though I still want to document the magical frequency for future reference. As they worked together to decode the barrier's rhythm, Rhett found himself sharing stories about particularly challenging deliveries and the security systems he'd encountered. He told her about the time he had to tango with an enchanted suit of armor to get past a duchess's magical defenses, and her quiet laugh made him want to tell her more. The ribbon glowed softly between them as they moved in perfect sync through the second barrier, their combined approach proving more effective than either of their individual methods. Rhett couldn't help but feel a surge of pride in their teamwork, a foreign sensation for someone who'd always preferred working alone. As they pressed deeper into the woods, Rhett kept his expression carefully neutral while his mind raced. Being magically bound to an obsessively organized botanist should have been driving him crazy. Instead, he was starting to think this curse might have some unexpected benefits. Not that he'd ever admit that out loud. Donovan crouched behind a cluster of enchanted hydrangeas near the Wailing Well, his yellow eyes reflecting the eerie blue glow emanating from its depths. He adjusted his anti-glamour camera with practiced precision, muttering under his breath as he arranged his surveillance equipment. Finally, after weeks of chasing dead ends, I'll expose this council corruption. He pulled a crumpled bag of bacon-flavored chips from his mismatched suit pocket. The public deserves to know what's really happening with this fog situation. The truth-detecting crystals clinked softly as he positioned them around the well's perimeter. Each one had cost him a week's salary, draining his savings account down to double digits, but they'd be worth every penny when they revealed whatever supernatural shenanigans the council was trying to cover up. He stress-munched another handful of chips, brushing crumbs from his perpetually rumpled tie and ignoring the small voice in his head that suggested maybe he should have spent some of that crystal money on a new suit instead. A haunting melody drifted up from the well, but something about it made his sensitive werewolf ears twitch and his fur stand on end beneath his human form. The usual ancient dirge seemed to be intertwining with, "Was that Love Me Tender?" He frantically adjusted his recording equipment settings, his yellow eyes narrowing with suspicion. This could be the breakthrough he'd been waiting for. "This is ridiculous," he growled, scribbling in his notebook so furiously the pen nearly tore through the page. The well's obviously been tampered with. Probably that Sebastian Lightfeather's doing, trying to manipulate public opinion before the council seat election. The very thought of the vampire's smug face made him crush his bag of chips, sending bacon-flavored crumbs cascading onto his shoes. Unbeknownst to Donovan, Zara drifted through the well stone wall, her vintage polka dot dress rippling in a non-existent breeze. She smirked at his methodical setup, before floating closer to his equipment, passing right through his carefully arranged surveillance gear. The first sign something was wrong came when his crystal-clear audio feed dissolved into static, punctuated by what sounded suspiciously like kazoos playing "My Heart Will Go On." The cacophony made his sensitive ears flatten against his skull. "What the?" Donovan frantically adjusted knobs and dials, his fingers trembling with mounting frustration as the kazoo serenade only grew louder. His truth-detecting crystals, which had cost more than his monthly rent and required 3 separate trips to the shadiest parts of the magical black market, suddenly lifted off the ground and began floating in a conga line around the well, twinkling mockingly in the ethereal blue light. "No, no, no." He lunged for the crystals, but they dodged his grasp, spinning faster as they conged past his face. His notebook flipped open of its own accord, pages rustling as invisible hands filled them with elaborate doodles of hearts, unicorns, and what appeared to be a surprisingly detailed sketch of him slow dancing with his camera tripod. Donovan straightened his crooked tie, trying to maintain some semblance of professional dignity, while fighting down the urge to howl in frustration. His carefully pressed suit, already wrinkled from hours of lurking near the well, felt like it was mocking his attempts at appearing put together. "This is fine. Everything's fine. Just some minor technical difficulties." His coffee thermos cut him off by bursting into an enthusiastic rendition of "Can't Take My Eyes Off You," directing its tinny serenade at his bewildered camera equipment. The scent of bacon wafted past his sensitive nose, making his stomach growl and his concentration waver. The camera's display screen flickered, showing only elaborate shadow puppet performances of famous romantic scenes. Was that Romeo and Juliet done entirely in hand shadows? And good grief, was that his own silhouette dramatically declaring love to his favorite bacon-flavored snacks? Delete, delete, delete. Donovan jabbed frantically at buttons, his yellow eyes narrowing as his claws threatened to emerge and scratch the expensive equipment. But each deleted file was immediately replaced with an even more elaborate shadow puppet love story. His microphone picked up nothing but ghostly covers of top 40 love songs, complete with spectral backup singers who seemed to be following him with particular enthusiasm. Cold spots materialized around him, following his movements and showing up on his thermal imaging equipment as perfect heart shapes. His werewolf instincts, usually razor-sharp and perfect for investigative journalism, were completely overwhelmed by the cacophony of supernatural interference. The familiar scent that usually helped him track his subjects was masked by an overwhelming bouquet of roses and chocolate, making his nose twitch in protest. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again. And again. Oh no. He pulled it out to find it sending rapid-fire messages to various council members. To Councilmember Thornshade. "Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm investigating corruption but thinking of you." To Sebastian Lightfeather. "My heart howls for justice and maybe for you too." Stop, stop, stop. Donovan fumbled with his phone, nearly dropping it into the well. He caught it just in time, but not before it sent one last poetic message to the entire council group chat. His normally pristine notebook was now filled with glittering pink ink, transforming his careful observations into phrases like, Donnie plus investigation equals true love, and Mrs. Donovan Lupescu mystery, surrounded by sparkly hearts. This is. He couldn't even finish the sentence, as his equipment began performing a synchronized dance routine to Love Shack. The final straw came when his camera started projecting heart-shaped lens flares while playing what sounded like a ghostly barbershop quartet version of I Will Always Love You. Donovan gathered his malfunctioning equipment, now thoroughly covered in inexplicable sparkles that seemed to multiply every time he tried to brush them off. His tie had somehow tied itself into a heart shape, and his notebook was still writing love poems of its own accord. "This isn't over," he declared to the apparently empty square, though the effect was somewhat undermined by the trail of glitter he left in his wake. "I'll expose the truth about this fog if it's the last thing I—" His thermos cut him off with the opening notes of Never Gonna Give You Up. Behind him, unseen, Zara conducted the well's haunting melody into a triumphant finale of Can't Help Falling in Love, adding a few ghostly flourishes of her own. She watched with satisfaction as Donovan retreated, his usually confident stride reduced to a glitter-sprinkled shuffle. "And that," she announced to the empty square, "is how you handle nosy werewolf journalists." She gave the well's melody one final theatrical flourish before disappearing back through its ancient stones, leaving behind only the faintest echo of supernatural kazoos. Chapter 6: Mayhem at the Market. Rhett ducked under a floating display of color-changing scarves, tugging the ribbon that connected him to Era. His enhanced senses picked up traces of the missing package's magical signature, but the fog seemed determined to make tracking anything about as effective as chasing his own tail. "The spell says it's this way." "No, wait." He spun around, causing Era to stumble into him, her flowery scent momentarily distracting him from the task at hand. "Now it's saying it's back where we started. The magic's bouncing around like a caffeinated pixie in here." "If you'd properly secured the delivery in the first place," Era started, but her lecture was cut short by an enchanted carpet zooming past them at head height, forcing them both to duck. "Near, far, wherever you are." The carpet serenaded, trailing tassels dramatically behind it like some overly theatrical stage curtain. "That's not even the right musical era for a magic carpet," Rhett muttered, then caught Era's raised eyebrow. His ears felt warm. "What?" "I have layers. And a perfectly reasonable knowledge of musical theater, thank you very much." The tracking spell tugged again, this time with enough force to make his enhanced senses tingle uncomfortably. It led them past a stall of enchanted quills, where the feathers suddenly perked up like excited puppies, hovering in formation as they began scratching frantically across floating parchments. The sound reminded him of 1,000 tiny claws on hardwood. "Oh no," Rhett groaned as the first poem floated their way, already dreading the inevitable romantic sonnet. His wolf instincts told him to run, but the ribbon made that impossible. "Bound by fate and ribbon fair, the wolf and Phi make quite a pair," Era read, her cheeks flushing. "This is ridiculous. Quick, behind here." Rhett pulled her behind a display of levitating lanterns, just as a cascade of poetry-filled parchments rained down where they'd been standing. "We should split up," Era suggested. "Cover more ground." "Great idea, except," the ribbon suddenly contracted, yanking them together just as a line of tap-dancing cauldrons high kicked their way through the market. "Puttin' on the Ritz?" The cauldrons clinked and clanked in perfect rhythm. Pressed against Era, Rhett caught a whiff of moonflowers and something distinctly her. His wolf senses went haywire, picking up not just her scent but the rapid flutter of her pulse, the slight catch in her breath, even the way her fingers twitched against his arm. The proximity was maddening, stirring his instincts in ways he desperately tried to ignore. "The package," he blurted, desperate for distraction. "I can smell its magic. It's coming from that fortune-telling booth. There's definitely something unusual about it, spicy and sharp, like cinnamon with an edge." They approached the gaudy purple tent where a crystal ball glowed ominously, its surface swirling with misty images that made his nose twitch. A line of giggling customers watched as it displayed various romantic scenarios, each more dramatically staged than the last. "Your soulmate will appear when you least expect it," the crystal ball intoned to a young vampire who was practically vibrating with excitement. Possibly while you're both stuck in a magical mishap. Rhett tried not to think about how eerily applicable that particular prediction felt. We need to get through there. Rhett pointed to a narrow passage between stalls, already dreading the close quarters. After you? The ribbon ensured their after you became more of an all at once as they squeezed through the tight space, his enhanced senses overwhelmed by her nearness. Floating price tags exploded overhead, showering them with sparkly confetti that seemed determined to nest in Era's hair like tiny persistent stars. Don't move, he murmured, reaching up to brush some glitter from her cheek. His fingers tingled where they made contact with her skin, and the ribbon hummed contentedly as if pleased with their predicament. He wondered if she could feel his heartbeat picking up speed, betraying emotions he wasn't ready to examine too closely. A group of enchanted mannequins nearby began mimicking their poses, drawing laughs from passing shoppers. One mannequin pretended to swoon, while another caught it dramatically. Let's just get the package, Era said, but Rhett noticed she didn't immediately step away. They followed the magical trail through the spice section, where cinnamon sticks arranged themselves into hearts, and a bunch of sage whispered, "Ask her about her favorite flower." So, Rhett cleared his throat, approaching a merchant's stall. We're looking for a recently delivered package, about yay big, probably radiating mysterious magical energy? The merchant, an elderly gnome with a spectacular mustache, waggled his eyebrows. Ah, young love. Reminds me of how I met my third wife. Or was it my fourth? Rhett backpedaled, knocking into a display of love potions. The bottles teetered precariously, until Era whipped out her wand, casting a containment spell that caught them mid-fall. Nice save, he admitted. Someone has to be the responsible one, she replied, but he caught the hint of a smile. Finally, they spotted the package, in the hands of a street performer juggling various magical items while reciting, "Destiny works in mysterious ways, bringing souls together through magical haze." That's our package, Rhett stepped forward, but the performer's eyes lit up. Volunteers. Perfect. Step right up, folks, and witness the dance of destiny. The market's enchanted music system crackled to life, a romantic ballad filling the air. The ribbon pulsed in time with the music, practically dragging them into a dance position. I suppose we have to, Era sighed, but her hand settled comfortably in his. Rhett tried to focus on the package as they twirled past the performer, but he kept getting distracted by how naturally Era followed his lead, how their movements synchronized without effort. The ribbon glowed softly, stretching and contracting with their steps until... Got it. Rhett snagged the package mid-spin, pulling Era close as they came to a stop. Around them, merchant stalls rearranged their wares into heart shapes, while the quills from earlier frantically composed what appeared to be an epic ballad titled The Market Dance of the Bound Ones. Well, Rhett said, very aware of Era still in his arms, mission accomplished? The ribbon sparkled innocently between them, and somewhere in the distance that carpet was still butchering power ballads. Era held her breath as she carefully lifted the whispering orchid from its protective wrapping. The delicate bloom shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence, its petals a swirling canvas of midnight blue and silver. She was acutely aware of Rhett hovering over her shoulder, the cursed ribbon ensuring he couldn't stray more than a few feet away. Could you not breathe quite so close to my ear? She muttered, trying to ignore how his presence sent a disconcerting tingle down her spine. Sorry, princess, but this ribbon doesn't exactly give me much choice in the matter. His chuckle stirred her hair, and she could practically hear the smirk in his voice. As she arranged her tools with methodical precision, crystal magnifying glass, enchanted tweezers, and her favorite silver recording quill, her usually well-behaved plants seemed to have developed minds of their own. The bioluminescent vines along the ceiling began to dim and pulse in a suspiciously romantic pattern, while her prized moon roses turned to face them, creating an intimate spotlight effect. Even her normally stoic hanging ferns had started swaying in a way that reminded her uncomfortably of slow dance music. Stop that, she hissed at a particularly enthusiastic fern that was swaying like it was trying to orchestrate a mood. The plant merely rustled innocently, its leaves shimmering with what she could have sworn was mischievous delight. She'd never seen her garden quite so rebellious before, and she had a sinking suspicion it had everything to do with their unwanted guest. The whispering orchid began to pulse with a gentle light, its petals unfurling like pages of an ancient book. Era leaned forward, squinting at the intricate patterns emerging on the silvery surface. The markings seemed to shift and dance beneath her gaze, as if trying to form words in a language she could almost but not quite understand. Her fingers itched to trace the delicate lines, even as her scientific mind warned her to maintain professional distance. "Those markings," Rhett said suddenly, pointing over her shoulder. "They look like the old trade routes through the whispering woods." Era blinked, surprised. "You're actually right. The spiral pattern here matches the merchant paths from the Third Age." She shot him a sideways glance. "How did you know that?" He shrugged, the movement pulling the ribbon slightly. "Courier, remember? Knowing the old paths is part of the job." As the orchid's whispers grew stronger, Era found herself unconsciously leaning back against Rhett's steady presence. The ancient botanical language flowed around them in ethereal whispers, and she noticed the ribbon had loosened enough to allow comfortable movement. Her quill scratched across the parchment as she translated, but she nearly dropped it when the orchid projected a series of ghostly images into the air. A map of twisting paths appeared, forcing them to move in tandem to view it from different angles. "There," Rhett said, his hand brushing her arm as he pointed. "That's the old Moonstone Bridge. Nobody uses it anymore because the crystalline supports became unstable after the Great Magical Surge," Era finished, then caught herself. "Not that I make a habit of memorizing bridge histories." "Of course not." His tone was amused, but his focus remained sharp as he caught something she'd missed. His head tilted slightly, ears twitching. "There's a secondary magical frequency underneath the main whispers. Something about a guardian?" The breakthrough sent a wave of excitement through her greenhouse. Flowers burst into bloom, releasing a shower of celebratory petals that drifted around them like snow. One landed in Rhett's hair, and Era had to fight the urge to brush it away. They fell into an unexpectedly efficient rhythm, Era translating the complex botanical terminology while Rhett sketched out a rough map, adding notes about seasonal magical fluctuations and courier shortcuts. The ribbon hummed contentedly, giving them more freedom to move as they worked in harmony. The greenhouse's enchanted lighting caught Rhett's profile, turning his amber eyes to molten gold. Era quickly looked away, busying herself with adjusting the orchid's position. She felt her hair flowers betraying her by glowing brighter, their soft light reflecting off her notes. "Could you pass me that notebook?" she asked, reaching for it just as Rhett did the same. Their hands brushed, sending a spark through the ribbon that made it sparkle like starlight. Several nearby plants swayed suggestively, and a patch of singing violets started humming what sounded suspiciously like a love song. Era felt her pointed ears burning pink. "The humidity must be affecting them," she said primly, though they both knew the greenhouse's climate was perfectly regulated. The orchid's whispers grew clearer as they worked, revealing intricate details about the artifact's protection spells. "These wards combine ancient growth magic with physical barriers," she explained, surprised to find herself sharing more than just the necessary information. "It's similar to how I designed the greenhouse's security system, actually. See how the magical signatures overlap? Like the way you've got those thorn vines programmed to recognize different threat levels?" Rhett asked, gesturing to the defensive plants guarding the entrance. "I noticed they didn't try to strangle me this time when we came in." Era stared at him, momentarily forgetting about the orchid's final revelations. "You notice my security system's classification protocols?" He gave her a crooked smile that did nothing to help her professional composure. "I notice a lot of things, Princess. Especially when they're trying to eat me." The ribbon between them felt warm and comfortable, more like a natural connection than the curse it was supposed to be. Era quickly pushed that dangerous thought aside, forcing her attention back to the orchid's shifting patterns. She had a job to do, and no amount of unexpectedly observant werewolves or meddling plants was going to distract her from it. even if her hair flowers did insist on glowing like tiny, romantic betrayers every time he smiled. Chapter 7: Secrets and Schemes. Donovan slipped through the clock tower's side entrance, his nose twitching at the musty scent of ancient parchment and magical ink. The records room stretched before him, a labyrinth of floating file cabinets that bobbed and weaved like metallic jellyfish in an administrative sea. Finally, he muttered, yellow eyes adjusting to the dim light as a cabinet drifted past his head. The hourly chime rumbled through the tower, and the filing system pirouetted in a synchronized dance of reorganization. Donovan ducked under a drawer that swooped too close, his mismatched tie flapping against his wrinkled shirt. His fingers traced along folder tabs, following breadcrumbs of bureaucratic paperwork until he found what he was looking for: Historical Incident Report, the Trickster's Gift. The file was ancient, its edges trimmed in fine silver that still sparkled after centuries. Inside, delicate script detailed how a fae known only as the Laughing Sage had created the Discord relic, supposedly as a jest to help stuffy supernaturals lighten up. The artifact had worked too well, throwing the entire supernatural community into chaos until the first council managed to contain it. Donovan's journalistic instincts tingled as he noticed the patterns. Every major supernatural conflict in Evergloam's history had coincided with the relic's awakening. The vampire-werewolf trade dispute of 1876, the Great Witch Strike of 1923, and now. He pulled out today's council meeting minutes. Arguments about Sebastian Lightfeather's bid for a council seat, complaints about werewolf territory expansion, and rising tensions between traditional and modern magical practitioners. The same kind of discord that had awakened the relic before. His journalist's nose twitched at the familiar scent of bureaucratic deception, paper, ink, and the faint trace of magical concealment spells. "This isn't just about love spells gone wrong," he muttered, his notepad frantically recording connections as his yellow eyes darted across the pages. The council's keeping quiet about how their own political games are feeding this thing. The thought of exposing SCREAM's hypocrisy made his tail want to wag, though he maintained his professional composure. Something caught his eye, a pattern in the redactions, black marks that appeared too precise, too deliberate. Each censored section aligned perfectly with historical fog incidents. His enhanced werewolf vision picked up the slight shimmer of magical ink beneath the censoring spells, teasing him with secrets just out of reach. The massive gears of the clock groaned overhead, casting shifting shadows that made the text swim before his eyes. A centuries-old report peeked out from between two newer files, its edges crisp despite its age. The heading read, "Containment Protocols, Unauthorized Binding Magic." The musty scent of ancient parchment tickled his sensitive nose. "Gotcha," Donovan whispered, fumbling for his camera with fingers that itched to shift into claws. His hands trembled with the thrill of discovery as he photographed page after damning page. Sparkles from Zara's earlier prank scattered across the lens, and he brushed them away with an irritated grunt. Meddlesome ghost. The glitter stuck stubbornly to his sleeve, a reminder of how that transparent nuisance kept interfering with his investigation. The evidence mounted on his enchanted notepad, each note connecting like constellations in a sky of conspiracy. Sebastian Lightfeather's council bid, the mysterious fog, the ribbon binding that odd couple, it all aligned too perfectly to be coincidence. His wolf instincts howled that he was onto something big, something that could finally expose the council's centuries of careful manipulation. A fresh file caught his attention, an ornate invitation to the upcoming supernatural gala. Donovan's lips curled into a predatory smile as he imagined the headlines: "Council Corruption Exposed, Love Under False Pretenses." The tower's security wards hummed to life, sending a warning tingle down his spine. He dove behind a shelf just as clicking heels approached. "Yes, the gala preparations are underway," a council member's voice echoed through the room. "We'll contain the situation before," the voice faded as they passed. Donovan's reporter's notebook practically vibrated with potential headlines. He stress-munched through a bag of bacon-flavored chips, leaving greasy fingerprints on the pages as he scribbled. Supernatural Scandal, Council Manufactures Romance. Binding Magic Betrayal, the Truth Behind the Fog. Stolen blueprints of the gala venue spread across his lap as he mapped escape routes and optimal camera positions. "This is it, Lupescu," he mumbled around a mouthful of chips. "The story that'll make your career." The warning bells began their ominous toll. File cabinets swooped and spun, racing back to their assigned positions. Donovan snatched crucial documents about the council's artifact history, stuffing them into his worn leather satchel. His moment of triumph deflated slightly when his notes suddenly transformed into flowing script. Chapter 1: Love Among the Filing Cabinets, a Romance. "Zara," he snarled, watching his carefully crafted exposé morph into flowery prose about star-crossed lovers in an administrative setting. Standing before a dust-covered mirror, Donovan straightened his perpetually crooked tie. "Council members, prepare to answer for your crimes," he rehearsed, trying to ignore how the clock hands aligned behind him like the crosshairs of a cosmic target. A file cabinet bumped his elbow, sending a fresh shower of sparkles cascading over his shoulders. In the mirror, his reflection looked less like a hard-hitting journalist and more like a rumpled detective who'd lost a fight with a glitter bomb. But the evidence in his satchel was solid. The gala would be his moment to expose everything, assuming he could keep Zara from turning his big reveal into a romantic comedy. The clock tower's gears ground overhead, counting down to what would either be his greatest triumph or his most spectacular failure. Zara burst through the apothecary wall in a dramatic spiral, her spectral form trailing pink sparkles from the magical fog that still lingered throughout Evergloam. She found Juliet perched precariously on a step-stool, attempting to untangle her fix-it wand from a particularly amorous wind chime that kept trying to serenade it with tinkling versions of love songs. "Oh honey, you will not believe what I just witnessed," Zara announced, floating upside down and adjusting her perpetually perfect vintage curls. "Our favorite nosy newshound is stress-eating his way through an entire package of bacon-flavored quill tips." She mimicked Donovan's intense scribbling motions, adding exaggerated chomping sounds that made Juliet snort magical tea through her nose. "Zara?" Juliet spluttered, wiping shimmer-infused tea from her sweater. "I just got this cats and cauldrons pattern to stop meowing." "Focus, darling. This is serious, investigative theater." Zara gathered wisps of the lingering fog, crafting a miniature illusion of the clock tower with the sort of dramatic flair she'd perfected during her decades of ghostly existence. "I followed him through the records room for hours. You should have seen me, I was brilliant. First, I made his self-inking quill write only in emoji. Then his magical recording crystal started playing nothing but boy band hits from the 90s. She couldn't help but preen a little, remembering how Donovan had nearly chewed through his favorite bacon-flavored quill in frustration. The ghost swooped toward the magical message board, her spectral energy causing the letters to dance and rearrange themselves. "Donovan knows too much," then "Gala disaster incoming," followed by "Save the Lovebirds." She took particular satisfaction in making each exclamation point sparkle with ethereal light. "He found documents?" Juliet asked, finally freeing her wand, only to have it immediately attached itself to a love-struck feather duster. Zara rolled her eyes affectionately at her friend's perpetual magical mishaps. Zara's usual bouncy energy stilled, her form flickering like a candle in worry. The pearls around her neck felt heavier somehow, even in her ghostly state. Ancient council records about artifacts of power. The kind that could explain why your little love fog went totally haywire. She drifted lower, her pearl necklace glowing faintly with remembered anxiety. "He's planning to expose everything at the gala." The thought made her vintage dress ripple with spectral static. The temperature dropped several degrees as Zara began orchestrating an elaborate reenactment using floating potion bottles, channeling her former life's theater experience. "This is Rhett," she declared, making a blue bottle swagger through the air with what she considered an appropriately wolfish attitude. "And this prissy little vial is Aira." A delicate crystal bottle pirouetted huffily, capturing the Phi's perfectionist nature perfectly. The shop's enchanted broom provided a dramatic soundtrack, sweeping in suspenseful crescendos that made Zara's theatrical heart soar. "And here comes Donovan," Zara continued, sending a squat brown bottle charging through the display with theatrical flair, ready to reveal all their secrets in front of the entire supernatural society. She phased through several shelves in agitation, her vintage dress rippling with spectral energy as she moved, causing a chain reaction of love potions to break into a harmonized version of Can't Help Falling in Love. The bottles swayed like a ghostly choir, their contents shimmering in rhythm. Not helping. Juliet yelped, trying to silence the impromptu choir with increasingly frantic waves of her wand. Zara zipped over to the magical mirror, possessing it with a flash of pearly light that reminded her of her old stage spotlights. Look at this evidence he's gathered. The mirror's surface rippled, showing glimpses of ancient texts and suspicious council memos, though it kept interrupting with helpful suggestions like, "Have you considered dating a nice werewolf? And Mercury isn't in retrograde, perfect time for romance." Zara couldn't help but snicker at the mirror's persistence, even in crisis mode. "We have to warn them," Juliet exclaimed, accidentally pointing her wand at a stack of invoices that immediately formed themselves into paper cranes and began performing an aerial ballet that would have made Zara's former theater director proud. Already on it. Zara's ghostly energy surged with excitement, causing the shop's crystals to chime in harmony like an ethereal wind chime orchestra. The cash register started enthusiastically printing receipts. 1 dramatic rescue price, priceless. She felt her spectral form practically buzzing with anticipation of the chaos to come. Gathering more fog particles, Zara created a spectral map of Evergloam, her former life's directing skills coming in handy as she staged their rescue mission. If we take this route past the foggy brew, Donovan always gets distracted by their bacon-wrapped everything. We can catch Rhett and Era before they stumble into another magical mishap. Her form zipped between glowing location markers like an overenthusiastic supernatural GPS, leaving trails of ghostly sparkles in her wake. "And the gala?" Juliet asked, trying to catch the still printing receipts that were now forming a paper chain around her ankles. Zara's mischievous grin returned full force, her transparent features practically glowing with delight. "Oh, I have plans. We could haunt his camera until it only takes selfies, or maybe?" She wiggled her transparent fingers, causing a nearby stack of evidence papers to explode into heart-shaped confetti that danced through her spectral form. Oops. Would be a shame if that happened to all his precious documents. The confetti settled into a perfect heart shape on the floor, and Zara couldn't resist adding a theatrical bow. "You're terrible," Juliet laughed, even as she tried to look disapproving. "I prefer creatively helpful," Zara declared, already diving dramatically through the floor. Her voice echoed back through the floorboards, trailing ghostly glitter. "Operation Save the Lovebirds is officially in progress." The magical inventory, apparently caught up in the moment, began rearranging itself into an elaborate countdown display, with potion bottles forming the numbers and enchanted crystals providing a sparkly light show. "Show off," Juliet muttered fondly even as her fix-it wand chose that moment to start slow dancing with the feather duster. Chapter 8: Foggy Hearts and Frayed Tempers. Rhett followed Era through the dense foliage of the hidden grove, the whispering orchid's soft glow casting ethereal shadows across ancient tree trunks. The fog here moved differently, almost like it was dancing, and the cursed ribbon connecting them pulsed in rhythm with waves of magical energy that made his wolf senses tingle. "Well, this is cozy," he quipped, ducking under a low-hanging branch. "Though I usually prefer dinner first, before getting this up close and personal with magical anomalies." The ribbon's light flickered at his words, and Rhett noticed how its glow seemed to match the ancient pulse of magic flowing through the grove. Each step they took together made the ribbons shine steadier, stronger, as if responding to their growing synchronization. "Focus, wolf. These runes are incredibly delicate." She knelt before a weathered stone pedestal, her fingers tracing symbols that seemed to shift and change under her touch. Despite his usual instinct to crack wise, Rhett found himself mesmerized by her methodical approach. The way her brow furrowed in concentration, how she muttered theoretical formulas under her breath, it was actually kind of impressive. Not that he'd admit it out loud. The ribbon between them loosened slightly, allowing him to move closer without resistance, as if approving of their collaborative effort. The third sigil represents binding magic, she explained, more to herself than him. But the fourth, there's something unusual about the resonance pattern. The artifact at the center of the pedestal, a crystalline sphere swirling with pink mist, suddenly hummed to life. Whispers filled the grove, echoing their thoughts. As the artifact's power grew, the ribbon's glow intensified, creating a counterpoint to the chaotic energy. Fascinating how she notices every detail, his own voice echoed back, making him cough loudly. Probably just magical feedback, he said quickly, avoiding Era's startled glance. These things pick up all sorts of random magical static. Like that time I delivered a shipment of enchanted mirrors that wouldn't stop complimenting everyone's hair. The artifact pulsed again, and this time the ribbon responded with a harmonious chime. Rhett watched in fascination as the silvery light from their bond created intricate patterns in the air, perfectly countering the artifact's chaotic swirls. His wolf senses picked up subtle changes in the magical frequency, a discordant note that made his fur want to stand on end. Try adjusting the containment field about 3 degrees to the left, he suggested. The energy feels unbalanced on that side. Era looked surprised, but followed his suggestion. The artifact's glow stabilized immediately, and the ribbon between them loosened further, as if pleased by their cooperation. How did you? Let's just say when you've transported enough volatile magical goods, you develop a sixth sense for when things are about to go boom. The fog suddenly intensified, forcing them closer together as magical energy crackled through the air. Rhett instinctively moved to shield Era, his body blocking the worst of the magical backlash. Having her pressed against him felt dangerously right, and the ribbon's light pulsed in perfect rhythm with their heartbeats. The thaumaturgical resonance is creating a cascading effect through the ley lines, Era started explaining, her hair flowers glowing brighter as she worked through the problem. Which could trigger a sympathetic response in the binding magic's core matrix, Rhett finished automatically, then winced at her shocked expression. What? I listen. Sometimes. When there's nothing good on the radio. As they worked together, the artifact's erratic energy began to shift. Each time Era's structured spellwork created a framework, Rhett's instinctive magic would naturally flow into it, strengthening the pattern. The ribbon's glow intensified with each successful combination, its light creating a protective barrier around them. It's like... Era paused, watching the interplay of their magics. Like a dance. Your wild energy and my controlled spells, they're not fighting anymore. They're complementing each other. The artifact began to destabilize, its pink mist turning stormy. Without hesitation, Rhett took charge, combining Era's theoretical knowledge with his practical experience. We need to create a containment lattice, he said, already moving his hands in the familiar patterns he used for securing unstable magical packages. Like a triple reinforced shipping ward, but with your botanical stabilization matrix woven through it. As they moved together, the ribbon's purpose suddenly became clear. Each gesture they made in tandem caused the artifact's chaos to dim slightly. Their opposing approaches weren't a weakness, they were exactly what was needed to restore balance. The elder tree knew, Era breathed, her eyes wide with understanding. It didn't bind us together to torture us. It chose us because we're different in exactly the right ways, Rhett finished, his hands steady on her shoulders as they completed another stabilization pattern. The ribbon hummed with approval, its light now a steady, warm glow that perfectly countered the artifact's wild energy. Together they created a harmony that neither could have achieved alone. His chaos tempered by her order, her structure energized by his wildness. The artifact responded to their unified approach, its dangerous swirls of power gradually settling into a controlled shimmer. For the record, Rhett murmured as they maintained the containment field, I still think your color-coded filing system is completely unnecessary. Era's laugh caught them both by surprise. And I still think your wing-it approach to magical transportation is terrifying. But there was no heat in her words, just the same warm understanding reflected in the ribbon's steady glow. The artifact pulsed one final time, then settled into a stable rhythm that matched their combined magical signature. The ribbon between them felt different now, less like a constraint, and more like a bridge, connecting their complementary strengths in exactly the way the elder tree had intended. Era's heart raced as she watched the artifact pulse with an increasingly erratic energy, its pink mist swirling in dangerous patterns that made her botanical instincts scream in warning. Rhett's hands moved with practiced efficiency, trying to contain the chaos through sheer determination, but she could see it wasn't working. The magic leaked through his fingers like water through a sieve. That's not, she bit her lip, the flowers woven through her green hair dimming as anxiety crept in. The energy patterns, they're responding to something else. Rhett shot her a quick glance. I've handled unstable magical items before. Just need to. The artifact flared, sending a wave of power that made nearby saplings bend backward like they were caught in a hurricane. Stop. Era's analytical mind clicked pieces into place as she observed the correlation between Rhett's forceful approach and the artifact's increasingly unstable reactions. The ribbon between them tightened uncomfortably, and suddenly everything made sense. It's behaving like a moonweep vine. A what now? Rhett grunted, still wrestling with the artifact. They're notorious for rejecting forced care. The more you try to control them, the more they rebel. She stepped closer, her professional mask slipping as she watched him struggle. Her fingers twitched with the instinct to intervene, the way they always did when someone mishandled a delicate specimen. This isn't something we can strong-arm into submission. Moonweep vines taught me that lesson the hard way during my first year of study. The artifact pulsed again, and without thinking, Era placed her hands alongside Rhett's. The ribbon between them blazed brighter, and she felt her cheeks warm at their proximity. Her heart fluttered traitorously in her chest as his familiar scent, pine needles and wild air, enveloped her. See how the magic responds? It's like a symbiotic organism. The more we resist. She trailed off as the forest floor shifted beneath them, ancient roots rising to create a supportive cradle around their feet. The energy patterns swirled and danced, reminding her of the delicate balance she maintained in her greenhouse. The more it pushes back, Rhett finished, his voice softer than usual. So what's your solution, Bloom? We work with it, not against it. Her pointed ears flushed pink as she adjusted their shared grip on the artifact, trying to ignore how the warmth of his hands seeped into her skin. The usual ordered thoughts in her mind, scattered like leaves in an autumn breeze. Like coaxing a shy plant to bloom. You have to. She swallowed hard, fighting the urge to retreat into her usual clinical detachment. Her carefully maintained professional distance felt paper-thin. You have to be vulnerable with it. Let down your defenses. To her surprise, Rhett didn't scoff or argue. Instead he nodded, his hands relaxing under hers, calloused fingers settling naturally against her own. The contact sent tingles up her arms, making it harder to focus on the task at hand. Show me. That simple trust, so different from his usual skepticism, sent a wave of warmth through her chest. Several nearby moonflowers burst into sudden bloom, their silvery petals unfurling in the magical haze, while the delicate vines of a climbing jasmine stretched eagerly toward them. She felt a flutter of embarrassment at how readily her magic responded to her emotions around him, betraying feelings she'd rather keep hidden behind her professional facade. Era closed her eyes, letting her botanical magic flow naturally like water finding its path through soil. The familiar sensation of life and growth tingled through her fingertips, as natural as breathing. She felt Rhett's energy beside her, wild and instinctive as a summer storm, but instead of clashing with her structured approach, it complemented it perfectly, like sunshine after rain. The ribbon between them loosened, hanging like silk instead of chains, almost forgotten in the harmony of their combined magic. Its usual constraining presence faded to a gentle reminder of their connection. That's it, she whispered, sensing the artifact's chaos beginning to settle beneath their joined hands. The swirling patterns in its magic reminded her of the elder tree's branches, ancient and knowing, weaving together order and chaos. Her heart quickened at their success, at how right this felt. See how the energy moves? Like a dance instead of a fight. each step flowing into the next, finding balance in the motion. She could feel the steady rhythm of their magic, as natural as a heartbeat, as graceful as leaves dancing in the wind. She opened her eyes and found herself caught in Rhett's amber gaze, the artifact's magic reflecting like starlight in his eyes. Her breath caught, and luminescent petals began drifting down around them in a shower of light, responding to her unbidden emotions. She couldn't remember the last time she'd lost control of her powers like this. The artifact hummed contentedly, its harsh pink mist softening into a gentle glow that spread through the woods like sunrise. Era became acutely aware of how close they stood, how natural it felt to work in harmony with someone she'd once considered her complete opposite. The scent of pine and leather that always clung to him mingled with the sweetness of the moonflowers, creating something new and intoxicating. Rhett's lips curved into a genuine smile, not his usual smirk, but something real and warm that made her heart stutter and the flowers around them pulse with answering light. "Guess you were right about the gentle approach, Bloom." Words bubbled up in her throat, dangerous, honest words about how right this felt, how maybe the ribbon wasn't a curse after all, how his wild nature balanced her need for control, but her carefully constructed walls slammed back into place. Instead, she stepped back, fumbling for her notebook, missing his warmth immediately. "I should document the stabilization process," she mumbled, pressing her pencil to paper with trembling fingers. But instead of recording the magical frequencies and energy patterns, she found herself capturing the way the settling magic highlighted the strong line of Rhett's jaw, how his usually tousled hair caught the artifact's glow like a halo, the softness in his expression that made her wonder if he felt it too, this dangerous, wonderful shift between them. The ribbon between them swayed gently, and Era realized it no longer felt like a tether forcing them together. It felt like a bridge, an invitation to something she wasn't quite ready to name. Juliet fidgeted with her fix-it wand, cursing under her breath as another perfectly styled curl sprang loose from her updo. The Evergloam clock tower's grand ballroom sparkled with enchanted decorations, but all she could focus on was Sebastian's graceful navigation through the crowd of council members while keeping one eye on Donovan's suspicious movements near the refreshment table. Stay cool," she muttered, accidentally tapping her wand against her thigh. A nearby fern burst into tiny purple flowers that hummed, "Love Potion number 9. Sebastian caught her eye from across the room, one eyebrow raised in that perfectly arched way that somehow conveyed both amusement and concern. How did he manage to look so composed, while she felt like a cauldron about to bubble over? Her attention snapped to Donovan as he pulled out his magical recording equipment, a crystal-powered camera designed to capture supernatural energy signatures. Panic fluttered in her chest. The waiter passing by with a tray of delicate hors d'oeuvres suffered the consequences of her nervous twitch. Every tiny sandwich transformed into a rainbow-frosted cupcake, each one bursting into musical accompaniment. The harmonious desserts created an impromptu chorus that echoed through the council chamber. "Oh, sugar and spice," Juliet groaned, watching in horror as the singing pastries drew attention from nearby council members. A particularly stern-looking vampire duchess raised one perfectly manicured eyebrow at the display. Sebastian materialized at her side, smoothly steering her away from the musical desserts. "Perhaps we should move toward the..." His usually unflappable expression cracked, as her wand started blasting an enthusiastic power ballad at full volume. The crystal chandelier above them trembled in sympathy with the bass notes. "I can fix it." Juliet stumbled backward, catching her heel on the hem of her dress. She grabbed Sebastian's arm for balance, setting off a chain reaction that had every champagne glass in a 10-foot radius floating dreamily toward the ceiling. The bubbles in each glass began to dance and sparkle with increasing intensity, creating a mesmerizing light show against the ornate molding. "Juliet," Sebastian whispered, his voice strained but gentle, as several council members ducked to avoid the floating beverages. "While I appreciate your creative approach to party entertainment," a champagne glass pirouetted past his ear, sprinkling droplets in his perfectly styled hair. "Right? Entertainment." She seized on the idea, pointing her wand at the magical dance floor. The elegant waltz music transformed into a peppy polka, complete with heart-shaped musical notes that bounced around dancers' feet. occasionally giving particularly enthusiastic council members tiny crown-shaped halos. At least it distracted from Donovan's attempt to corner them with his evidence folder, which she noticed was bulging with what looked like surveillance photos. Council Elder Moonweaver drifted over, her silver robes trailing starlight and leaving tiny constellations in her wake. The sight made Juliet's palms sweat. "Miss Moon, I've been meaning to ask about your latest innovations in love potions." "Oh? Well, funny story about potions." Juliet launched into a nervous ramble, her hands fluttering like startled butterflies. "Did you know that adding too much powdered moonstone can turn a heartache-healing draft into a tap-dancing tonic? I once accidentally made my entire Coven River dance for 3 days straight, which really wasn't as fun as it sounds, especially when we had to hop-step kick our way through Mrs. Whisperwind's funeral, and she was not amused even as a ghost." "Elder Moonweaver," Sebastian cut in smoothly, his cool hand steadying her elbow. "I believe they're about to announce the Council's new initiative for cross-species harmony." The ice sculptures, sensing Juliet's flustered energy, began dramatically posing. The elegant swan transformed into a muscular hero with flowing hair and impressively chiseled abs, while the dolphin morphed into a swooning maiden, complete with a billowing dress and what appeared to be a tiny ice tiara. Sebastian's lips twitched as he watched an ice unicorn toss its crystalline mane in slow motion, batting its frozen eyelashes at nearby guests. Donovan approached, notebook in hand and yellow eyes gleaming with triumph, but Juliet's wand had other ideas. A spark of magic hit his accusatory speech mid-sentence. "The Council's corruption is clear as vampires and werewolves should share their flair, dancing together without a care, in moonlit nights so bright and fair." The assembled council members burst into appreciative applause, several of them wiping away tears of mirth. Donovan's face turned an interesting shade of purple as he tried to stop rhyming, his reporter's notepad now sprouting tiny poetry-themed doodles in the margins. "Well done," Sebastian murmured in her ear, his breath surprisingly warm for a vampire. "Though perhaps we should." "I have proof." Donovan pulled out his photographs, but Zara chose that moment to swoop through them, transforming the damning evidence into what looked suspiciously like supernatural dating profiles. Juliet caught a glimpse of one that read, "Lonely vampire seeks witch with questionable magical control, chaos welcome," before it floated away into the enchanted ceiling. "Seeking tall, dark and bloodthirsty," one read. "Must love moonlit walks, and have a good sense of humor about silver allergies." Chapter 9: The Calm After the Chaos. Era adjusted the moonbloom orchids for the 7th time, hyper-aware of Rhett's approaching footsteps. The ribbon between them had faded to a gentle shimmer, but she swore she could still feel its warmth against her skin. Her normally steady hands trembled slightly as she heard the greenhouse door swing open. "Your security system's gotten friendlier," Rhett called out, ducking under a typically aggressive vine that now seemed to be waving at him. "Should I be worried that your plants are actually being nice to me?" "They're not being nice," Era protested, though she watched in bewilderment as her notoriously temperamental dancing jasmine swayed invitingly, creating an arch over Rhett's path. The plant, which normally snapped at visitors with its thorny tendrils, was practically preening under his attention. "They're just adjusting to the post-fog magical atmosphere. Right? And that venomous violet just winked at me because of atmospheric conditions?" Heat crept up Era's neck as she noticed her plant's bizarre behavior. The greenhouse had transformed into something from one of those romantic movies Juliet was always gushing about, complete with softly glowing flowers and strategically positioned vines that seemed determined to guide them closer together. Even her usually standoffish moonbloom orchids were tilting their luminescent petals toward Rhett, like eager puppies seeking attention. "The magical residue is clearly affecting their," Era's scientific explanation cut off with a gasp as she fumbled a prized starlight succulent. Her heart leapt into her throat as the delicate crystalline leaves trembled. Rhett's hand shot out, catching the pot before it could shatter. Their fingers brushed, and Era's heart definitely did not skip a beat at the contact. The succulent's leaves chimed softly, as if laughing at her predicament. "You were saying?" Rhett's amber eyes sparkled with amusement, his hand still supporting hers under the pot. The warmth of his skin seemed to radiate straight through her gardening gloves. I was conducting a thorough analysis of the plant's recovery process. Era launched into her prepared speech, withdrawing her hand and clutching her clipboard like a shield. Her neat rows of data suddenly seemed like a lifeline to sanity. The reintegration of normal magical patterns shows a 47% improvement in photosynthetic efficiency, and the cooperative behaviors exhibited by previously antagonistic species suggests the greenhouse's climate control system chose that moment to malfunction spectacularly, releasing a shower of luminescent dewdrops that caught in her hair like stars. A few droplets slid down her neck, leaving trails of tingling warmth. Era finally met Rhett's gaze, her carefully constructed explanation withering under the warmth of his expression. The ribbon between them pulsed with a gentle golden light that matched the flutter in her chest. "You know what I think?" Rhett stepped closer, reaching out to brush a glowing droplet from her cheek. "I think you need to leave your worries behind." Era blinked. "Did you just make a terrible plant pun?" "Absolutely. Someone had to break the tension before your weeping willow actually started crying." A laugh bubbled up before she could stop it. "That was horrible. But it made you smile." Rhett's usual cockiness softened into something more genuine. "I like when you smile." The greenhouse temperature rose several degrees as warmth bloomed in Era's chest. "You've changed everything, you know," she admitted quietly. "My perfectly organized systems, my carefully structured routines." Around them, flowers burst into synchronized blooming, filling the air with shimmering pollen. "For the better, I hope." Rhett's hand found its way to her favorite moonwhisper plant, his fingers automatically stroking the leaves in the precise pattern she'd shown him weeks ago. "Definitely for the better." Era watched him tend to the plant with surprising gentleness. "You've taught me that sometimes the best solutions aren't found in my research notes." "And you," Rhett said, his voice uncharacteristically serious, "taught me that some things are worth slowing down for. Worth taking responsibility for." The space between them disappeared as Rhett leaned in, one hand cupping her cheek. Just as their lips met, an enthusiastic Venus flytrap began humming what sounded suspiciously like a love ballad, complete with percussion from its snapping leaves. They broke apart laughing, and Era felt her hair flowers pulse with light, illuminating the greenhouse in a warm glow. "I don't suppose you could convince Gerald to stop his musical career?" she asked, trying to glare at the performing plant. "Are you kidding? He's got talent. We should book him for the next town festival." Rhett grinned, then gestured at a cluster of unruly climbing moonvines. "Though maybe we should handle these escape artists first." Together, they moved through the greenhouse, their movements falling into an easy rhythm. Rhett's practical solutions complemented her methodical approach perfectly. He'd build temporary supports while she coaxed the vines into proper growth patterns, or he'd spot potential issues before they could disrupt her carefully planned arrangements. Era found herself marveling at how naturally they worked together, despite their differences. His spontaneity balanced her precision in ways she hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about expanding the tropical section," Era found herself saying as they worked, pulling out her planning notebook. The familiar weight of it in her hands brought comfort, its pages filled with her meticulous notes and carefully drawn diagrams. "The humidity controls need adjusting, but with the right modifications. We could install that misting system I mentioned," Rhett finished, peering over her shoulder at the precise diagrams. His warmth at her back sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. He grabbed a pencil, adding rough sketches that somehow made her perfect plans look even better. "And maybe create a new delivery route through here to avoid disrupting the sensitive plants." His additions to her diagrams were surprisingly thoughtful, and Era had to admit that his seemingly casual suggestions showed a deeper understanding of her greenhouse than she'd given him credit for. Zara spiraled through the apothecary's ceiling in a dramatic swoop, her spectral form trailing wisps of ethereal light. Below, Juliet stood amid a chaos of celebration potions, each one spontaneously erupting into heart-shaped fireworks at the mere mention of Era and Rhett. You should have seen Donovan's face, Zara cackled, swooping low to hover cross-legged above Juliet's workbench. With a theatrical wave of her translucent hand, she conjured a ghostly reenactment of the werewolf journalist's defeated exit from the gala. Her illusion showed him trudging away, complete with drooping tail and shoulders, while ethereal violins played a mock-sad symphony. She couldn't resist adding a tiny rain cloud above his head, just for dramatic effect. Being dead had its perks when it came to creative storytelling. Juliet, mid-sip of her magical tea, snorted the beverage through her nose in a sparkly spray. "Stop. You're terrible," she giggled, wiping her face with her sleeve. The sight of her best friend's tea-soaked expression made Zara's spectral heart swell with affection. "I'm brilliant is what I am." Zara drifted toward the message board, possessing it with a shimmer of spectral energy. The pushpins began dancing across the cork surface, spelling out epic matchmaking success story, while nearby potion bottles clinked together in a celebratory toast. She made the pins perform an elaborate choreography, just because she could. "We should really start a business. Supernatural matchmakers, we put the romance in necromance." The slogan had come to her during one of her late-night haunting sessions, and she was particularly proud of it. Her form flickered with sudden intrigue as she recalled something, the memory causing her ethereal glow to brighten with excitement. "Speaking of success stories, you'll never guess what I found while stalking our favorite nosy reporter through the Clocktower archives." She savored the moment, knowing how much Juliet hated when she dragged out reveals. "Please tell me it wasn't more of his bacon-scented notebook collection," Juliet groaned. Zara suppressed a ghostly chuckle, remembering the werewolf's rather embarrassing organizational system. "Better." Zara flipped upside down, casually organizing the scattered relationship intervention notes on Juliet's desk into a proper case file. "Ancient texts. The kind that make your magical aura do that twitchy thing it's doing right now." Sure enough, Juliet's normally steady magical glow pulsed with curiosity. "What kind of texts?" Using the fog particles still lingering in the shop's corners, Zara created miniature illusions of swirling symbols, delighting in how the ancient markings danced through her spectral form. "See these magical signatures? I spotted them around the Wailing Well, but they don't match anything in your modern grimoires." She'd spent hours studying the patterns, memorizing each curve and line until they became as familiar as her beloved polka dot dress. The temperature in the shop plummeted as Zara's excitement grew, frost patterns spreading across the windows in delicate spirals that mirrored her ethereal energy. "And here's the really interesting part. I think there might be other artifacts hidden in Evergloam." The magical inventory on the shelves suddenly rearranged itself into question marks, responding to her ghostly energy. She couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at her ability to still affect the physical world, even if it was just through magical resonance. "Remember those whispers I heard while following Donovan through the records?" Zara possessed a teapot, making it dance across the counter while she spoke, leaving trails of steam that formed into miniature versions of the symbols she discovered. They mentioned other magical bindings throughout history. Not just random curses, but intentional ones, like the ribbon that brought our favorite opposites together. She spun the teapot in a particularly dramatic pirouette, savoring the way her ghostly influence made the china sing against the wooden counter. She darted between shop items, creating an elaborate timeline of supernatural events. Floating candles marked significant dates, while enchanted crystals projected images of past incidents. "Look at these patterns. The fog's appearance? Not as random as we thought." "Zara?" Juliet interrupted, trying to catch a crystal ball that kept spinning to show wedding scenes instead of historical events. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? That our matchmaking days might not be over?" Zara grinned as nearby love potions began bubbling with excitement. "Let's just say I've noticed some interesting tension between certain supernatural citizens. The kind that might benefit from our expertise." With a dramatic flourish, Zara sank through the floor, leaving behind a trail of ghostly glitter. Above Juliet's head, sparkles formed the words, "The fog may be gone, but some mysteries are just beginning." Juliet's enchanted broom, apparently caught up in the romantic atmosphere, immediately began sweeping the glittery message into a perfect heart shape. "Show off," Juliet muttered fondly, watching as her ghost friend's laughter echoed through the floorboards. But she couldn't hide her smile as another celebration potion burst into heart-shaped fireworks, this time spelling out Team Zara, supernatural matchmaker extraordinaire in shimmering pink sparks. Chapter 10, Kisses in the Clear. Rhett strolled through Phantom Falls Market, still marveling at how different his hand felt in eras without the ribbon's magical tingle. The floating market stalls seemed to catch their mood, rearranging themselves into romantic archways draped with twinkling fairy lights and flowering vines. He couldn't help grinning at how the market's usual chaos had transformed into something almost deliberately enchanting. "The market's never this well behaved," he whispered to Era, giving her hand a squeeze. "Think it's trying to make up for all the trouble it caused us?" "More likely it's still drunk on residual love potion fog," Era replied, but her smile took any sting out of the words. A shimmer of silver caught Rhett's eye, drawing his attention to Mireya's wind chime stall. The banshee moved with fluid grace, her silver hair catching the morning light as she arranged her displays. Each chime she touched sang a different prophecy, creating an ethereal symphony that made his wolf senses tingle. Movement near the courier supplies caught his attention, and Rhett had to bite back a laugh. Nash Grafer, usually the picture of wolfish confidence, was doing the worst job of casually shopping he'd ever seen. The other werewolf kept fumbling with magical tracking devices while stealing glances at Mireya. When she caught him looking and raised one elegant eyebrow, Nash nearly dropped an entire shelf of enchanted compasses. "Oh, this is painful to watch," Rhett murmured, but he couldn't look away from the train wreck unfolding before them. Mireya's storm-gray eyes drifted to where Rhett and Era's hands were joined, focusing on the fading magical signature where the ribbon had bound them. She reached up to adjust a particular wind chime, its crystalline voice whispering, "Bonds chosen rather than forced bloom sweetest in the garden of fate." Nash's shopping basket hit the ground with a clatter. The market's usual bustling energy seemed to shift around Mireya's stall, creating a pocket of otherworldly calm. She moved between the displays with deliberate purpose, selecting specific chimes that harmonized with something only she could sense. The resulting melody carried hints of the Wailing Well's haunting song. "Nice weather we're having," Nash blurted out, then immediately looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. "You know, now that the fog's cleared up. Makes for better, wind chime conditions." Rhett pressed his lips together, trying desperately not to laugh. Beside him, Era squeezed his hand in warning, but he could feel her shoulders shaking with suppressed giggles. The corner of Mireya's mouth twitched slightly, and Nash's entire face lit up like he'd just won the supernatural lottery. "The winds of change blow in many directions," Mireya replied, her voice carrying that distinctive banshee echo that made Rhett's fur want to stand on end. "Some bring fog, others," she glanced meaningfully at Nash, "clarity." Nash drifted closer to her stall, seemingly unaware he was moving at all. The usual market chaos felt distant, muted by Mireya's presence, though Nash's eager energy created ripples in the supernatural calm. Several shoppers paused to watch the unlikely pair, their curious glances drawing Rhett's attention to the striking contrast between Nash's awkward charm and Mireya's mysterious allure. Without warning or explanation, Mireya selected a specific wind chime and held it out to Nash. The gentle song it produced made his ears perk up, head tilting in that distinctly canine way that Rhett recognized from his own moments of being caught off guard by an interesting sound. Mireya turned away quickly, but not before Rhett caught what looked suspiciously like a genuine smile crossing her face. She shared a loaded glance with Era that made Rhett's instincts prickle. He'd seen enough supernatural creatures keeping secrets to recognize that look. "Some bonds," Mireya said softly, adjusting another chime, "take longer to recognize than others." The wind chimes around her stall swayed in a non-existent breeze, their combined melody sounding remarkably like an old love song his grandmother used to sing. Nash stood frozen, holding the wind chime like it might shatter if he breathed too hard, a thoughtful expression replacing his usual easygoing grin. Rhett recognized that look. He'd worn it himself often enough while puzzling out his feelings for Era. Should we rescue him? Rhett whispered to Era, though he already knew the answer. Absolutely not, she whispered back, tugging him away from the stall. Some things need to unfold in their own time. As they walked away, the market stalls shifted again, creating a perfect view of Nash carefully hanging the wind chime from his belt, its gentle song following them through the market's winding paths. Era settled into her favorite spot by the research desk, carefully transcribing Mireya's cryptic words into her leather-bound journal. Winds of change whisper secrets to those who know how to listen, she muttered under her breath, her quill scratching against the parchment. A clinking sound drew her attention, and she glanced up to find Rhett deliberately misaligning her carefully arranged pruning tools. You know that's not where the silver shears go, she said, fighting back a smile as he placed them at a precise 45-degree angle from their proper position. Oh, is it not? Rhett's eyes sparkled with mischief. I could have sworn this was your new organizational system. The afternoon sun filtered through the newly restored magical panels of the greenhouse, casting prismatic patterns across her desk. The light caught the crystalline edges in a way that reminded her of Mireya's hair, how it had seemed to capture and reflect impossible angles of luminescence, defying the natural laws of light that Era had so carefully documented in her botanical studies. You've been staring at those notes for 20 minutes, Rhett observed, expertly handling a temperamental moonvine that had started to creep toward her inkwell. His fingers moved with practiced precision, using the exact pressure points she taught him to guide it back to its trellis. Professional curiosity about our mysterious banshee? There's something about her connection to the fog, Era mused, her hair flowers pulsing with a soft, thoughtful glow. The way she spoke about the winds, it's almost as if. She stopped mid-sentence, watching as Rhett added a new label to her botanical classification system. Musically inclined specimens, he read aloud, gesturing to a cluster of humming bellflowers. Since we keep finding plants that respond to different harmonics. That's actually brilliant, Era admitted, warmth spreading through her chest at how naturally he'd adapted to her methods while still bringing his own insight. The greenhouse seemed to agree, the plants swaying in a gentle rhythm as Era unconsciously leaned against Rhett's side, adding a new section titled Supernatural Species Interactions, Banshee Resonance to her notes. The comfortable weight of his arm settled around her waist, and she felt herself relaxing into the contact. You know what they say about ghostly wind chimes, Rhett drawled, breaking her concentration. I'm certain I don't want to. They're always inspiriting. That was terrible, Era groaned, but couldn't suppress her laugh as he tugged her away from the desk toward a struggling shadow fern that needed transplanting. Their hands met in the soil, working in tandem to ease the stubborn plant into its new pot. A nearby shelf wobbled, and they moved together to stabilize it, their fingers brushing. The touch sent a familiar tingle through Era's skin, but unlike the forced proximity of the cursed ribbon, this contact was freely given, natural. She thought of Mireya's knowing look in the market, the way those storm-gray eyes had seemed to see right through them. The monitoring crystals are showing perfect harmony, Era noted as they straightened up, watching the magical displays pulse with steady, healthy readings. She moved to adjust a growth lamp, and Rhett was already there, angling it precisely how she needed it without being asked. Speaking of harmony, she continued, I have a theory about how Mireya's banshee nature might interact with the residual magical frequencies from the... Rhett's kiss caught her mid-word, soft and sure. Around them, a cluster of moon blossoms burst into sudden bloom, their petals unfurling in a cascade of silver light. Era's carefully constructed train of thought scattered like leaves in a breeze. When they finally pulled apart, Rhett was already reaching for her tea collection. Break time, he suggested, deliberately selecting the spoon she reserved for measuring growth accelerant. That's not the, she started, then caught his grin. You're impossible. Impossibly charming, he corrected, switching to the proper spoon with a wink. The mystery of Mireya and her cryptic warnings settled into the background as they shared the fragrant tea, though Era couldn't help jotting down a few more notes about researching banshee interactions with magical flora. Their different approaches to the greenhouse's expansion plans, his intuitive leaps and her methodical calculations, flowed together as naturally as the afternoon light through the crystal panels. Juliet stood in her apothecary, wrestling with a stack of relationship intervention files that seemed determined to defy organization. Her enchanted broom, usually helpful in its own chaotic way, had developed a new hobby of arranging everything into heart shapes. "That's not where those go," she scolded the broom as it swooped past, turning her neat pile into a perfect heart. "We're running a professional establishment here." From his perch by the counter, Sebastian raised an elegant eyebrow. Professional might be stretching it. The vampire's expensive suit still sparkled with remnants of the gala's magical mishap, though he wore the glitter with surprising dignity. "Oh hush, you're just grumpy because your hair still sparkles in direct moonlight." Juliet bounced on her toes, unable to contain her excitement. "But can you believe it worked? Era and Rhett actually figured it out. The fog, the artifact, their feelings." She waved her hand at a stack of inventory labels, which immediately transformed into flowing cursive poetry about moonlit romance and destiny. Sebastian plucked one of the transformed labels from the air. "Your eyes shine like bottled starlight, your heart beats like drumming rain?" He read, maintaining his composure despite the twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Perhaps we should focus on restoring your inventory system before you accidentally turn all your healing potions into love sonnets. Actually," he continued, casually producing an ancient-looking scroll from his cloak, "I found something interesting in the council archives." Juliet spun around so fast she tripped over absolutely nothing, sending her fix-it wand into a spectacular spiral. Pink sparks showered the nearby shelves, turning every potion a brilliant shade of rosé. "Oops," she mumbled, her purple hair frizzling with static electricity and curiosity. "But what did you find? Is it mysterious? Dangerous? Romantically significant?" Sebastian unfurled the parchment with careful precision, though his usual composure slipped when Juliet's excited bouncing caused her wand to release another burst of magic. His perfectly styled black hair suddenly sparkled like a disco ball. "Must you?" he started, but the apothecary itself seemed to catch Juliet's enthusiasm. Bottles began sliding across shelves, arranging themselves to spell out next adventure in glowing glass. "Ooh," Zara's voice echoed dramatically as she phased through the wall, adding appropriate ghostly ambiance. "Very mysterious, very portentous." Juliet attempted her most professional scholarly expression as she leaned over the parchment. "Well, as a qualified magical practitioner I should probably..." She caught Sebastian watching her with that rare, fond smile that made her stomach do backflips, and accidentally elbowed a shelf of love potions. The bottles immediately burst into song, a harmonious chorus of "Can't Help Falling in Love." An explosion of magical confetti burst from the ceiling, as Juliet frantically theorized. It could be an ancient prophecy, or a treasure map, or a recipe for eternal happiness. "Or perhaps," Sebastian suggested dryly, helping her contain the shower of sparkles, "it's exactly what it appears to be, a series of mystical coordinates." The temperature dropped several degrees as Zara swooped through the room, dramatically reenacting their triumph at the gala. And then Sebastian was all, "I must maintain my dignity while covered in glitter." "If we're quite finished," Sebastian interrupted, though his perfectly styled hair still sparkling, ruffled in Zara's ghostly breeze. "We might need to investigate these markings together. Some of these symbols suggest..." "Together," Juliet squeaked, her magic surging. The cash register sprung to life, printing receipt after receipt for 1-1 romantic mystery-solving session, price, TBD. Sebastian leaned closer, his finger tracing a particular symbol on the parchment. His hand brushed against hers, and Juliet's wand immediately shot out a stream of heart-shaped sparks. She could have sworn she saw him hiding a smile, as he pretended not to notice. The crystal ball on the counter began swirling with misty visions, though instead of focusing on the mysterious coordinates, it kept replaying moments of them working together during the gala, adding a suspicious soft focus effect. "The crystal ball seems rather distracted," Sebastian observed, carefully folding one of Juliet's accidental love poems and slipping it into his pocket when he thought she wasn't looking. Zara, ever helpful, manipulated the afternoon light streaming through the windows to create a perfect romantic glow. Just setting the mood for your research session, she said innocently. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, and comment. I love hearing from you. You can also visit me at winvalentine.com to stay up to date.